Today on Homeworthy, we're traveling to Texas to see 3 beautifully designed homes rooted in traditional design. First, we'll visit an antique dealer's vibrant home in Dallas, filled with rich layers of pattern, bold pops of color, captivating artwork, and a cozy lounge made for cocktail hour. Next, we'll travel to Houston to tour a thoughtfully restored 1930s Tudor, where an interior designer created a serene retreat using a soft palette of dusty blues and greens. Finally, we'll tour another Houston home of an interior designer who blended classic traditional style with fresh touches that beautifully reflect her preppy, feminine style. Enjoy! You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. If you're looking to make your own space more homeworthy, we've teamed up with Cherish, our go-to online destination for chic, one-of-a-kind finds, sourced from the world's most wonderful vendors.
Mercury drops are from an artist I found on Cherish.
Whether we're after a bold statement piece or the perfect finishing touch, Cherish has extraordinary items that leave a lasting impression.
This table I bought on Cherish from Berlin, and it has a little bit of it's a tray, and it is mid-century, and it's one of my favorite pieces.
It's where we find iconic looks to set homes apart.
I think many dealers would agree that Cherish is the absolute best.
So to support Homeworthy and discover amazing items from Cherish, scan the QR code or click on the link below to start shopping.
Hey Homeworthy, I'm Lindley. Welcome to my home in Dallas. Come on in and I'll show you around. Hi, I'm Lindley Arthur, and we are at my home in Dallas, Texas. I am the owner of Lindley Arthur Antiques and Interiors. It's a residential firm here in Dallas, and I'm also an antique dealer. I live in this house with my husband Stroud and our 2 teenage boys, Leighton, who just graduated from high school, and Benton, who is a sophomore, and our dog, English setter Rory. We purchased this house in 2001. And it was on the market, and we just fell in love with the Southern architecture. It had a great floor plan and great bones, but we really wanted to make it our own, so we did a complete cosmetic remodel in the fall of 21 and moved in right around the holidays. So I'm definitely a traditionalist. I like to stay away from trends, and I'm also, because I have a background in antiques, I have a lot of antiques throughout my home that I've collected on my different buying trips to Atlanta, to Round Top. So you'll see lots of antiques throughout my house. That's a big part of my design and my design work as well. My look is also, I would describe it as like very layered, pops of color, but also just soothing at the same time. So welcome to my entryway. This is the first thing you see when you walk in the house. It is a large entryway, double story, very open and airy. So I really wanted to kind of give this space a little bit of a warmth to it, and so that it didn't feel so cavernous. So the very first starting off point to this space was this Henry Finkelstein painting. This is an artist that I love and had been kind of stalking his work for a while. He has amazing use of color and does a lot of plein air landscapes that he paints in Europe and in the Northeast. And so when we bought this home in 21, he was having a show at a local gallery here in Dallas called Valley House. And so I got there the very first day it opened and purchased this painting. And this was really the starting point for all the colors in the house. I loved the peaches and the greens and blues. I loved chartreuse is like my favorite color, so it had a little bit of that in the tree. And so this was the first thing we purchased, and it helped us kind of dictate the design for the rest of the house. I also purchased this in Atlanta. One of my favorite places to visit is the Scott's Antique Market. And I loved this because it had a casual feel. It was a bleached oak English console, And I loved like the neoclassical elements of the legs, and it was just the right size for this wall. And I also loved that I felt like it could, really display my collections. I'm like a addicted collector, and this displays two of my collections that I have throughout the house. One of them is the Chinese sort of lacquerware, and I have this all over my home, but I like collections to be grouped together for impact, and so I was able to sort of take this surface and group a bunch of the pieces I had collected over the years. And then the other thing that this console is able to display is my antique collection of blue and white Chinese pottery. There's a lot of reproductions on the market now, and they look great, but I'm a purist just because of my background, and so these are actually old 19th century vases and temple jars that I've bought throughout the years on my antique hunts. The other thing that I wanted to kind of show you guys is this wall going up the stairs. So I don't know why, but I love parrots. And so I had found these parrot prints at an auction in Nashville and just loved them. And so wanted to kind of fill this wall with a collection of those, and then also pull my blue and white over to this side. And so it kind of felt cohesive with the collection over here on the console. And then I did these fun sconces from Urban Electric with chartreuse shades just to give it like a little bit more of a modern feel, so everything didn't feel so old, and they are a little more contemporary, and I think they work really well. And I chose the chartreuse shades just because, like I said, that's like my very favorite color, and I just consider it to be a fun neutral. Okay, so this is a piece that I purchased at the Dallas Art Fair, which is probably one of my favorite annual events here in Dallas. And the artist's name is Shelley Reed. I purchased it from the Sears Payton Gallery in New York that comes to the fair. And what I love about this is Shelley takes inspiration from old paintings from like the Renaissance, and she'll pull just one element out of the painting and do it and amidst this like margin of white, and so it kind of takes on a contemporary feel. I just loved it, and I think that's so important when you buy art, is to feel some sort of a connection to it. And so it's a hummingbird, and we named our house the Hummingbird House after this. So I'm in the process of branding everything for our house and doing matchbooks, and little towels. Haven't gotten to finish it yet, but I think it's fun for your house to have a name and sort of an identity. So that's where we started with this one. This stool is obviously an antique. I think I purchased it at Scott's in Atlanta, and I just liked the architectural older element, feel of it under this more contemporary painting. And then again, just popped a little bit of chartreuse on it for fun, and again, I just can't get enough chartreuse. So the lantern in my entry kind of has an interesting story. I really wanted something special, and I used to, in our former house, go on walks in the morning, and there was this house I walked by every day that had this gorgeous English antique lantern on a post. And I would walk by it every day and just think about it, and it just inspired me so much to create this lantern in our entry. So I had this actually custom made by this wonderful brass craftsman here in Dallas, and he was able to replicate that lantern that I loved so much on the walks into this larger chandelier in our entry. So I think to make this space feel a little bit more warm, I think adding the antiques is so important. The warmer wood of the console, layering some fabrics. So like, for example, instead of just doing a plain white shade on these buffet lamps, we did it in a printed small print linen that wouldn't fight with the painting. The other thing was just the floor covering I thought was really important. This is a antique ushak that I found that, again, sort of pulled in those colors that I like, those rosy pinks and chartreuses. And it's just such a beautiful thing to welcome you right when you walk into the house, because it adds texture and color and keeps things from feeling too cavernous. So the dining room is a big space in this house, and it's very formal. It's right off the entry, and so I really wanted it to be a space that I just thought was really pretty. And of course, I've always wanted to do Gracie wallpaper, and this was the perfect opportunity. So that was one of the first things we selected for the house, was this Gracie wallpaper. I worked with Andrew in the showroom in Dallas here, who was amazing. And it's really hard to choose because everything is so beautiful, but I decided I wanted more of a silhouette, and so it's a little bit more contemporary. And when I say silhouette, what I mean is there's not like tons of coloration in the paper. It's a colored ground and then just like a creamy white with the scene. So I think it turned out really well. I also think, as much as I love the brightly colored Gracie, I felt like this was an investment that I wouldn't get tired of. And so I'm really happy with how it turned out. But on that note, you know, Gracie's very traditional and very formal. I didn't want this space to feel too formal. So that's why I selected this Abaca rug from Patterson Flynn, and it's like a little more beachy, a little more casual. And I think it really just like is a nice contrast to the formality and dressiness of the Gracie, but it still gives sort of an unexpected pop. So we custom colored the sort of greeny color in here to sort of match the ground of the Gracie. And then I had this furniture from my old house. This table, I actually was the very first antique I ever purchased. My husband and I were newlyweds, 27 years old, and went to Atlanta and found this in an antique mall. I think it was like $1,000. And I mean, I don't think I'll ever get rid of it. I love the banded top, and it's just, you know, my father-in-law held it back to Dallas in his pickup truck for us, and it's just special to us. So we'll keep it, you know, probably always. The other thing, so a couple other things about this room. When we bought this house, their fireplace was this like very large, you know, overscaled white wood fireplace, and I felt like it was too big for the room. And so I worked with a marble company here in Dallas to create this marble mantle. And it just is a better scale for the room, and I also like the way it looks against the Gracie. It has a ton of fun movement in the marble and in the stone. And then finally, something else interesting to kind of talk about in here is this painting. Another thing I purchased from Valley House in Dallas. This is an artist named Otis Hubband. He's actually like, I want to say he's in his 80s, and he lives in Houston. And he paints these really interesting contemporary figural pieces. And I know people sometimes don't want to layer art over, you know, hand-painted scenic wallpaper, but I actually love the way that looks. And I like the fact that it was, you know, something really contemporary against something much more traditional. In the dining room, this is, again, a directoire buffet that I purchased at Scott's Antique Market in Atlanta. It's moved with me from 3 houses, and I'll probably have it forever. And it's very traditional, so I wanted to do something a little more contemporary with the lighting. And these are handmade pottery lamps by a Dallas artist named Paul Schneider. And he's got a great workshop in the design district where you can choose your lamp silhouette and then also choose your glaze. You can do a solid glaze, but he also has some more fun glazes like this one. And peach is another one of my very favorite colors, and I liked the way it looked against this sort of celadon blue green ground of the Gracie, and so that's why I selected the peach. These are dahlias, which are some of my favorites, and they're, again, peach because I love it. And this wonderful company in Dallas called Park Cities Petals is kind of my go-to for floral, and they were able to do these for y'all to come over and tour the house. But dahlias are my favorite. I really love peonies. Those are probably the two that I go to the most. So I actually went to college for public relations and worked in PR for about 10 years for some major companies here in Dallas. And during that time, my husband and I had purchased our first house, which was a cute little ranch house. And I didn't have a budget to hire a decorator. And so my mom and I started going to Round Top, which is this really amazing antique show down in Central Texas. And I just started to purchase things there and for my home, and just enjoyed the trip every year with her. And I think, you know, about the time my second son was born, I had come home from work, and I was kind of needed something for myself. I was feeling a little lonely and home all the time, and just missed that work interaction with others, but didn't have time to take on a full-time job. And so I was always in my free time when the boys were at Mother's Day out, I would go wander through a little antique shop on Lover's Lane here in Dallas. And I just asked them one day when I was in there if they had any spaces for lease, and they did. And so I've been at that antique shop ever since. And that is sort of how my design career started, is people would come into the antique shop, they would like what they saw, they would ask if I could design their home, and it just sort of grew organically from there. Now I'll take you over to our adult lounge. Follow me. So we call this space our adult lounge, and the reason being is when we bought this house, it didn't have a bar, and my husband and I are big tequila soda drinkers, so that was not going to work. And so we needed to have a place where we could have a drink and a cocktail and just kind of unwind from the end of the day. So when we bought this house, this was originally a really dark paneled room. It was set up like this. I believe it had a TV as well, but it was set up as a second living area. And this space right here was all bookshelves as well. And like I said, our house didn't have a bar, and that wasn't going to work. And so my husband actually had the idea to take the bookshelves off from this side of the room and make this our bar. And so now this room is really our place that we come and we have a drink. And a lot of times at night, our good friends know that the adult lounge is open. And so they'll text us and say, hey, is the adult lounge open? And they'll come over, and it's kind of an open bar policy. It's a great way for, after dinner, our good friends to come over and just, spend time together. So like I said, it was really dark and paneled. And so we chose a Fine Paints of Europe color and lacquered it. And this process took, I want to say it took 3 weeks of sanding. It's just a very intensive process. But I'm so glad we did it because the color turned out so beautiful. It doesn't even have a name. It was a color that I just picked out of a chart of about 1,000 different little chips. But it felt like the right blue to me, and it felt soothing, and but still bold. And so we lacquered the room, and I actually love bookshelves. I know a lot of people are intimidated by them, but because I'm such a hoarder of antique accessories, I need them. And so the bookshelves in here are so great because I have my collections displayed. And so, for example, I collect antique tortoiseshell, and so I'm able to kind of group it in the shelves to show it off. Lacquerware is another thing I collect, and you'll see it sort of dispersed throughout the shelves. And family pictures. Bookshelves are such a great place to display family photos, and so I love having them. So like the other room, this was a fireplace that needed to be redone. And the art in here is actually one of my other favorite artists in Dallas. Her name is Erica Huddleston. And she does also plein air painting, but did this landscape in the creek bed by our old home. So it does sort of remind me a little bit of where we used to live. But again, I just think the colors are so pretty, and I'm always drawn to any sort of art depicting nature. So that's in here in lieu of a TV, which my teenage sons were not so sure about, but now they understand that you can actually have a conversation and you don't have to be watching a TV at all times, because they will come in here and talk to us. The other piece of art in here, my husband and I are big lovers of South Carolina and hope one day to move there part-time. But this is an artist named Thomas Hager, and he does photographs. And this was a photograph he had done of a marsh. And we just had to have it because it reminded us so much of Kiowa, which is our favorite place to go in South Carolina. And I like mixing different kinds of art. I like that this is a photograph, and I like an oil painting, so everything isn't the same. So this is the room my husband hangs out in the most. And so, and like I said, I'm a boy mom with 2 teenage boys, so I didn't want this room, I wanted this room to feel more masculine. And to do that, I chose a wool plaid for the sofa. And I think that's very lounge appropriate, and also just obviously is more masculine. The sisal rug on the floor, we also bound in leather to give another bit of a masculine touch. I always love a natural fiber rug, but then to play with the binding, whether it be with a color or leather or a special trim, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. And again, I love mixing traditional and contemporary. So I think this chair is a really fun example of doing that. I bought this chair at an antique store. It was covered in some sort of terrible silk. And I loved how the Pierre Frey geometric popped against it. I love the juxtaposition of the really old chippy frame that's more formal, and then this funky geometric fabric on it. So the coffee table in here is sort of an interesting story. I'm a big fan of liveauctioneers.com for finding special things, and I was searching for a Jansen mid-century coffee table because I like the brass details and the little finials that they are kind of known for, and the scale of it is usually small, which I needed in here. So I was able to buy this coffee table at auction for $150. But it came with a glass top, and I just felt like the glass in here we needed a pop of color. So back to my signature chartreuse, I found this chartreuse hide and had the tabletops covered in the leather, which again kind of gives a little bit more of a masculine feel in here, but also adds like a funky, fun, unexpected twist. Another auction find that lives in this room are these pair of mid-century black stools. They've gone with us from house to house, have sat in front of fireplaces, and I don't think I'll ever get rid of them. And I love the classic Le Tigre velvet from Scalamandre, so I had them recovered in that. I think this is like every house needs a little bit of Scalamandre velvet. And this is something that goes in every single room. It's a neutral. And so for this house, they fit perfectly in the windows. And then on Saturday night, if we're making ranch waters and our friends give us a call, we'll just pull them up in the group seating area and everybody has a place to sit. So we have lots of, alcohol out, but our main thing that we usually drink is tequila. So my husband has a lot of different tequilas that he likes to try. And I love these. These are Italian cordless lamps. They are, chargeable. And I like them in here because they kind of give it a little bit of a mood. I sell these at my booth at Antique Row. But we also move these outside sometimes if we're having a dinner party on the table. They're just great little move around spots of lights. And I think the brass gives them like a really kind of glamorous feel. Cranberry is sort of a color that I like to accent in this, in this space and also in my house. So these are just some Matuk. They were gifted to me by a vendor here we love, but I used an antique English toast server, which you see a lot at antique shows, and just folded the napkins as to keep them out so that they look pretty. The matchbooks, we try and just pick one up when we're on a trip, when we go out to eat at any of our Dallas favorite restaurants. One day I would love to do something a little bit more special with them, but for right now we're just kind of keeping them on our counter. And it just is kind of a fun reminder of restaurants we've been to that we loved or trips we've taken. And I always think the bar is an appropriate place to show a matchbook collection. Another find from one of my antiques trips is this chandelier that we have in here. It is a mid-century Jansen chandelier. I bought it from one of my favorite dealers in Atlanta, Antonio Cresputz. He's with Loft Antiques. And I bought this, I didn't even know if I was gonna keep it or sell it, but I loved it because I loved the sort of hammered two metals that kind of are mixed together. I loved the metal shade and just the size of it. And so it was in our bar back at our last house, and then when we were moving in here, I thought it would be perfect in here as well. And I just really encourage our clients to look for lighting that's found and not just order from, the big resources that everybody can order from, because then you can have something that nobody else has. Okay. Let's go take a look at the powder room. So this is our powder room. I live in a house full of boys, so I kind of wanted a pink powder room, and I loved this berry wallpaper as a jumping off point. And so we totally covered the room obviously in the berry wallpaper. This was a brand new custom made vanity. The original house had a really sort of heavy French looking chest as the vanity, and it didn't really work obviously with our scheme. And so I had my cabinet maker make something a little simple and more clean, but then I used my brass manufacturer to come in here and sort of jazz it up. So he did the brass edging detail you see, and then I also had him custom make these brass rosette hardware that I took from a mid-century cabinet that I had liked at an antique show. I just took a picture of the hardware that came on the cabinet and had him recreate it for the vanity. So for the lighting, I wanted to, again, do something a little bit more fun and modern. And so these are some fun sconces from Urban Electric. And I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but we did a custom pink backplate and shade, and it kind of pulls in the color of the wallpaper and gives it a little bit more of a fun touch in here. The linens are Leontine linens, the hand towels. I'm a big fan of Leontine in New Orleans, and I sent them a little clipping of the wallpaper, and they were able to come up with a color scheme and a monogram that worked really well for our hand towels. And I do not like a towel ring in a powder bath. It's too casual. So we selected a tabletop brass holder for the towels, and it just is a little dressier, feels a little bit more special. And then for the art, I think art needs to happen in the bathroom too. I don't think that these walls should be overlooked. And again, I like layering art on top of wallpaper. So I purchased this mid-century oil in Atlanta, and I think it just is fun and different and unexpected in here. So the mirror is actually something I had from our last house. It's made from a company called Vaughn, and I had it in our last house over a chest, and I needed a mirror in the powder bath here, and I wanted something kind of creamy white, and the size was perfect, so we just repurposed it in the powder bath. But I like using decorative mirrors in a powder bath and antique mirrors in a powder bath to do something a little more special and dressy in the space. All right, let's head to the family room. So this is our family room. Really in here, we didn't have to change a lot during the remodel. The beams were here, and the exposed brick wall was here, but we did choose to paint it because it was red. But I love exposed brick in a house. I think it really warms up a space. And that was really my goal in creating this room, is I wanted our family room to feel warm, and like on a cold winter's night, it was like a place you wanted to be. And so the sofas and the chairs have had a lot of wear. I'm probably going to recover them soon, just because I'm addicted to doing that. But Rory will get on the sofas. I mean, he will often sleep right here, despite the fact that he has a custom-made bed. But he will sleep on the sofas, and I don't really shoo him off anymore because these are perennials fabrics, and so it's indoor, outdoor. If he gets mud on him, I can just kind of get a little Dawn soap and some warm water and wash it off. And I really think that's how you should be in your family room. I think your family room needs to be a place you don't have to worry about things. So we use a lot of indoor, outdoor fabrics when we're designing a family room. So the sofas get a lot of wear with the dog. The chairs are actually a printed Jasper fabric that I love. And they're not indoor, outdoor, but because of the print, it seems to sort of hide the daily wear, and they've held up really great. The one thing I'd love to sort of show you guys that I haven't yet is that one of the things that I think is most special about this house that we did not actually put in, but are the wide plank floors. They are reclaimed from a church in England from the 1800s. And so I think that those are so beautiful. They may not be something that if I were building a house I would have picked, but adding to like the warmth factor and the homey factor that I was talking about wanting to achieve in this space, I think that the hardwoods did it. So we wouldn't dream of ever ripping them out. And I think it's so fun to just think about like who used to walk on these. They've seen a lot of weddings and baptisms and funerals over the years, and have been in, a sacred space, and now they're in our home. So I think it adds a lot of charm and character to our house. The Louis Philippe chests, so I have purchased a lot of these over the years. These are sort of I don't want to call them basic, but your most clean line, readily available antique chests. They're French and usually made out of walnut or mahogany, but I loved doing a pair of these on either side of the fireplace. There actually were built-ins into this brick when we bought the house, and that was sort of a fight my husband and I had. He kind of wanted to keep them and I did not. And I won that battle, and I'm glad I did, because I think it just updates the space to have a really beautiful chest instead and a mirror to reflect the light. The lamps are pottery lamps from a vendor I love named Stephen Gerold, and they're made on his potter's wheel. I love the color, and again, I love chartreuse, so these are Fermoy custom shades that I thought just, it would have been really easy to just put a white shade on these lamps, but this color combo just makes me happy, and threads, again, that chartreuse that I love so much throughout our house. I also want my house to feel personal and to do little touches throughout it that are unexpected. And this is a trip my husband and I went on with our boys last spring break, where we went on a boat and sailed the Virgin Islands, just the four of us. And the captain on the boat, when we disembarked, gave us these collection of little Polaroids he had taken of our family, just like playing games and snorkeling. And I didn't want to just put them away in a drawer or in a book. I wanted to keep them out for us to just look at and remember. And so they live in this little bowl on my chest. We did update the fireplace with a new cast stone surround. This fireplace is pretty much on if it is below 65 degrees in Dallas. I love to have a fire on. It's gas logs, which I know a lot of people like a wood burning fireplace, but I just don't like the mess of it. And so I love this fireplace because I can just turn it on if it's even remotely cold outside, and even if it's not for heat purposes, it just makes the house feel more homey. So it's on all the time. So this is a big wall right here, and it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do with it. And I went to the Southern Living show house maybe 5 years ago, and there was an artist named Catherine Booker Jones that I loved her work. And I think what I was drawn to was the contrast of the old and new. And so she takes these old antique ledgers and does a geometric painting on them. And I like that contrast, and I love that tension in the space. And so I collected a series of them and had them framed, and I feel like they really do what needs to be done in this room, which is to add something a little bit more contemporary, but that has a story. Well, I've had them at two different homes, actually. I mean, I've kept these. They were in my dining room at my old house. And I think if you buy art that you really love and you love the story behind it, you'll have it forever. So you may have noticed these throughout my house, but these are Forbes and Lomax brass switch plates. And I decided to put them in all the main living rooms downstairs when we did our remodel. It's kind of a little piece of unexpected jewelry for your house. And it's real easy to just have your electrician just put in a regular old switch plate, but there's something about these that just elevates the space, and I'm really glad it was something I chose to do when we did the remodel. So this is Rory. He is our English setter. He has been with us for about 8 years now, and he is like the fifth member of our family. He's the best dog in the world. He gets mistaken a lot of times for a long-haired Dalmatian, but he's an English setter, and you don't see that breed very much anymore, but they're awesome dogs. They're super calm. They're known as the Jerry Garcia of the sporting breeds, which is one of the reasons why we chose him, because life is busy with two boys and we didn't want a crazy wild dog. And he's been just like another child in our family. So I had the coffee table custom made for the space. There is a workshop in New Orleans on Magazine Street, and the lady's name is Kathy Slater. And she has a collection of tables, and she can do anything custom, and glass or limestone, different sizes, different finishes of iron. And I wanted to introduce a little bit of iron in here, and I didn't want to have any material that was like too precious, because my boys are constantly putting their feet on the coffee table. And so I called Kathy and asked her if she could help me design and make this coffee table for our space. And it's been great. I think it's got the neutral creamy limestone and the iron, which is basically indestructible. So that's been a really good addition to our home. I love everything she makes, and we use her line a lot in our designs. This little table is an interesting story. So again, like everything's traditional with the chest and a lot of the pieces in here, but I wanted something a little bit more fun and unexpected. So I worked with my brass workshop to design this custom table, and just kind of drew it up, and then picked a lacquer color for the top for like a fun, unexpected pop. And I like it. I think it gives the room something unexpected, which I think that tension is so, like I've said, is so important in design to make an interesting house. And so we love it. I mean, I don't know that we ever put anything on it, but it looks cute. And then this console table, this again was a very big wall. I had the painting. It was one of the first paintings I bought after we got married, and this artist is Renda Saprioto out of New Orleans. And it was in our original first house after we got married, and I think I was just drawn to it at the time because of the colors and probably the chartreuse. But I needed something to kind of anchor it on this wall, and so I had this custom grass cloth console built. And what I love about it is again, like back to the bookshelves in the adult lounge, like I have stuff, I collect a lot, so I wanted to have surfaces to display those collections. So this does it really well and is like a good home for those things. And one of the things I display in here is my mid-century collection of Italian Battosi pottery. So these, I have several pieces of them, but this was a mid-century Italian pottery house that was kind of known for this ombre glaze and these sort of whimsical carvings in the clay. And I just kind of snap these up whenever I see them. Sometimes I see them at antique shows, sometimes I see them on Etsy, but I love the color of them, and I think they look really fun, kind of popped in groupings in this console. Now I'll take you over to our kitchen. So the kitchen got just a cosmetic remodel when we moved into the house. The cabinets were really quality, and even though they had been here, they had this sort of pickled green glaze on them that wasn't going to work. My husband really didn't want to redo them. They were so solid, and so we just decided to paint them, which I think was definitely the right decision. So what we did in here was we painted all the cabinetry. We did a new backsplash. I wanted a little subtle color, but this is this beautiful watercolor tile by Pratt & Larson. That I think just kind of echoes the ground of my Gracie paper, which is in the dining room next door. And we did new marble on the countertops. And I know I have clients that are very afraid of marble, but I don't know if it's just because I'm an antique dealer, but I love patina, and none of that bothers me, and I don't think there's any replacing the beauty of a marble. And so I decided to just do marble, and we don't worry about it, and I haven't looked back. The appliances were all the same. We didn't touch any of that. But I did do new lighting. So this is an Urban Electric linear sort of pendant that I had, and I think it gives it a little bit more of a fun look in here against the really traditional kitchen. And we cook a lot. So, I mean, my husband and I, we probably cook 3 or 4 meals a week at home, dinners a week at home. And even though our boys are, going from one sport to the next, or, not all as home as much as they used to be, we make a real effort to eat at least 3 dinners together a week. And so what I loved about this kitchen was that it had space over here amongst these windows for a breakfast table. And so this is where we eat all of our meals. I mean, we have dinner, lunch, breakfast, always in this space. And I love it because it looks out on the backyard and it gets a lot of light, and it's connected to the kitchen, so it just feels really homey. This breakfast table I purchased from the Whimsy shop, which was an antique shop that's no more in Dallas, probably in the early 2000s. It was one of the first things I bought after we got married. And it's a farm table, and I love it. It's, again, been around for almost 200 years. And it's gorgeous wood, and you can still see the spot here on the top where the farmer probably made a repair and a patch. So it has a lot of history to it, and now it has a lot of history, and has hosted a lot of conversations amongst my husband and our boys. The chairs are Hollywood at home. I loved this natural feel in here, and had the custom cushions made. And the lantern is Urban Electric as well. It was just kind of a nice complement to the linear pendant, and I thought it was fun. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Palm Beach. So this is another little fun thing we did during our remodel. There was not a cabinet over here, and so it felt really imbalanced against this window. And so we did now that I'm thinking back, we did have the uppers, but we had no lowers. And so I decided that we needed to have some lowers here because it just felt really imbalanced. So we did add this, and then Rory, who, like I said, is a huge part of our household, needed a space for his water and food bowl. So this is, kind of a fun thing that we did. We just had the marble fabricator cut out holes for his dog bowls. In retrospect, I wish I'd given Rory a pot filler, but I did not, to fill his water bowl. But this is where he eats, and it kind of solves the problem of like, where do you put the dog bowl? So I purchased both of the rugs in here from my friend Brittany Crow, who has a company called The Rug Girl on Instagram. And she's amazing to work with. And so one of the first things we did was we picked out this runner for my kitchen. I know people are afraid sometimes of having like an antique or a Turkish rug in their kitchen because of, obviously I'm like making spaghetti sauce here, and I've dripped and splattered many times marinara on this rug, and it literally will come up with just some warm water and a blot. And so I actually think they're like the most wonderful workhorses for a kitchen because of the pattern too. It hides a lot of things, and it gives your kitchen color and adds to the homey factor that you want to have your kitchen feel like. And I also went to Brittany for our breakfast room rug, which I didn't want to have a Turkish rug in here just because I didn't want to fight with the proximity of the one behind my island. So she was able to do this flat weave for me. It's actually, in this bright sun is like lightened up a little bit with time, but it's a really soft peach and wool. And so wool is a great fiber to have in any sort of high traffic area because it's so easy to clean and so wears so well. So again, like we've had a couple of stains on this, but it just comes right up with warm water and a blot. So the counter, like we don't eat a lot at the counter. I will often have my laptop up here, and this is where I'll work when I'm at home. But we usually are eating at our table. But I love, I obviously we needed to have counter seating, and so I had these custom made. I didn't want to have a painted finish because I wanted them to stand out from the painted finish of the island, but I liked the warmth of this Cerussed oak and a little touch of brass. And when my boys were younger, I probably would have vinyl coated this fabric because of the stains. But now that they're 16 and above, I kind of feel like they shouldn't be spilling all the time. So this is a Nemesame print that I really love. And again, it just sort of brought in some of that warmer cranberry color that I love so much, and a little bit of the seafoamy green that is in the kitchen backsplash. So before we take a look at my bedroom, let's go check out outside. So this is our backyard, and it was when we came to look at the house before purchasing it, it was probably one of the biggest selling points for us, just because the house where we were living at the time was on a tiny lot, and we didn't even have a tree, and literally could look out of our master bedroom window and see our neighbor's laundry detergent. So this being on a corner and then having so much beautiful mature landscape was really appealing to us. We spend a lot of time out here when it's not 100 degrees. And so one thing that was important to us was having some screens that would come down, because Dallas is known for its terrible mosquitoes in the summer, and for some reason they love me. So these columns were originally wood arched sort of support structures, and they felt too rustic for the house, and also we couldn't house the drop-down screens in them. So we had them redone with brick, painted to match the rest of the house, and then these are the channels that the screens will come down. So it's great when it's so hot here and the mosquitoes are out. We can still sit out here and enjoy the patio. The furniture is something that I had wanted ever since I started in the design business, and would go into the showroom that had this line. And when we bought this house, I just decided to splurge on it. So I love it. This sofa is so deep. I actually took a nap out here yesterday, and Rory also loves to get out here and take a nap. And then these two chairs, my husband and I live out here in the fall and winter and spring, and we love this little fireplace because we've never had a fireplace outside before. So we love to light it and just take these chairs and turn them towards each other, and that's how we unwind after a long work day. Out here, we did put in the pool. We had never had a pool before, and we thought that our teenage boys would love having a pool. And the backyard was really positioned in a way that it was easy to put in a pool. There was a bunch of just green space over there. So we did put in the pool when we moved in, but this patio out here where the dining area is was there. We didn't change the stone. The hydrangeas were here already planted and thriving, as was all of the landscape. So it was really easy to just kind of move in and not do anything out here except do the pool. The furniture is kind of a mix of the formations that I have out here and then Restoration Hardware. I love their wash teak. And so the table is the Restoration Hardware wash teak, as are the chaise lounges. And then I had to have one of those fun Santa Barbara Umbrella Company umbrellas in my favorite peach out here. And so that's out in the summer and needed in 100-degree heat. But we spend a lot of time out here making frozen palomas, cooking out, hanging out with friends. Okay, let's head back inside and I'll show you my bedroom. So this is our bedroom, and I really need to recharge in my bedroom after like a busy day of work. Sometimes we'll get in bed extra early and watch TV or read. And so I wanted my bedroom to feel really restful and peaceful. And so the very first thing I started with in here was this textile from Penny Morrison that I love called the Vase. And it just had some really soft blues, and I knew I wanted to use this fabric in the room as a focal point. And so I decided to do it in the drapery. And it's great. We have it on traversing hardware. These are French doors that go out to an upstairs patio, and I can just, like a hotel, just kind of close it off at night and open it up in the morning. So it works really well, and I have never regretted splurging on a drapery in here. That was something I love. The bed we had custom made. I used an outdoor leather. It's actually a real leather, but it's been coated with an outdoor protection just for durability. And we just had our local workroom make it here in Dallas. Same with the nightstands. This was made by a local workroom here in Dallas. I just sort of designed some of the details, like the little bit of cerused oak and the glass knobs, just to sort of have it be a little more faint. I don't know if you'd call it more formal, but the cerused oak gives it a little touch of casual. And then the bedding is Leontine linens out of New Orleans. And this is my second set of bedding from Leontine. And I just think it is such worth the splurge. They have the most beautiful embroidery, the most kind of bespoke monograms. And, I have some clients that are afraid of an all white bed, but I have had stains on this before, and they come right out with just a little wash in the washing machine. You don't even have to send them to the dry cleaners. So it's worked out really well, and I also think that they're just linens that you have forever. I'm still kind of playing with this wall. I have this art here right now, and I like it, and I think it's fun. I'm kind of on the hunt right now for an antique screen to go on this wall, which I haven't found the right one yet, but for now, I have these fun floral collages. The artist is an artist out of Virginia, and she watercolors her own paper and then cuts out the flowers in the vases. So I think they're really interesting and fun. And I mean, if I don't keep them here, I'll find another place for them, I'm sure, in my house. So I like breaking up sheetrock in a house. So one of the things I like to do and wanted to do in my master was put some sort of textile on the wall. And this is a Philip Jeffries textiles called Handera cloth. And it's not a grass cloth, but it's actually like a cotton and has a little bit of the natural fibers running through it. But I do think if you can put a texture on your walls in your bedroom, it can make the space feel cozier, and which is what you want to do in a bedroom. You want it to feel cozy and serene. And the light blue kind of background of this paper was really suitable with the drapery fabric. So these are Stephen Gerold, which I have the teal ones downstairs. So these are sort of his very soft gray glaze that we did for our master bedroom. And I like them because, again, I really wanted the palette in here to be really soft and serene. The shades are custom. There's a shop here in Dallas called The Lamp Shop that we have a lot of our shades made at. And this is just an open box pleat shade with a little bit of trim. And it's kind of one of those, couture details in a home that, people sometimes overlook the lampshade, but I think the lampshade is one of the most important elements of a lamp, if not the most important element. So my advice to clients always is to think above your lampshade. Like, don't just keep the lampshade that came free with your lamp. So one of the reasons that we bought this house also was that I was just totally charmed by the sitting area off the master. And we bought this house. When we bought it, the sitting area was like a very dark wood. It had really dark paneling. It had this mantle surround was there, but not the marble. So what we did was we decided that we needed to lighten it up. And I have a wonderful specialty painter here in Dallas that I work with. So she spent a couple of weeks in this space lime washing, painting this room. There's a company in Houston called Chateau Domaine, and they have their own product. And so she spent some time in here applying that to the walls, and it gives it a really subtle striation. So it's not just a flat paint, but it gives it a little bit of more of an old world feel. And I think it has just totally changed the room. This is one of my most used spaces in our home. I opted to do a pair of chaise lounges here, which maybe is a little unexpected, but my husband and I love to come in here and watch TV before we go to bed and have a glass of wine. And I also love to come in here in the morning and have a little quiet time before I start my day. So it's been a really positive, serene spot for us in the house. And it's so small, and so it feels incredibly intimate. The painting is actually so special to me. It is commissioned by an artist named Susie Pryor out of Atlanta. And I wanted a portrait of my boys, but I didn't want a real formal seated portrait of them. I wanted something a little more casual, a little more abstract. And Susie, I had saved a clipping of hers, of her art that I had seen in Veranda, maybe in the early 2000s. And I reached out to her and sent her a photograph of my boys on the banks of a river that we used to stay at in Colorado in the summer. And she created this portrait of them, and it's probably one of my most prized possessions. So the aspect of this house that my husband was most excited about was that he is an avid hunter and fisherman. And when we bought this house, there was already some great storage behind here. And of course I wanted to put books and games and things like that, but I lost that battle. He has now turned this into his custom fly fishing cabinet. So he loves it. He comes in here and works in here, and they fish all the time. So I'm actually fine with it. It stays behind closed doors, so it doesn't bother me too much. To me, home is a place where you can be completely yourself. It's a place where you can unplug and you can recharge. And I think it's so important to be surrounded by family and friends, obviously, in your home, but also just by things that you love that sort of remind you of special times in your life. Thanks, Homeworthy. It's been so fun being with you today. Come back and see us soon.
Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Minette, and this is my home in Texas. Come on in. I can't wait to show you around.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, my name is Minette Jackson, and I'm an interior designer in Houston, Texas. Welcome to our home. I can't wait to show you around. Well, prior to living here in Houston, my husband and I lived in Nashville for a while, which is where he's from and where I went to school. And out of nowhere, my husband got a job offer here in Houston, where I'm from, and we thought the world was telling us to come back to Houston and be with my parents for a little bit, so we did that. And what it meant was we had to move very quickly one summer. So we came here and had about equivalent of a long weekend to find a house, and we walked into this one. And at first it was a little underwhelming. I could see that it had some good bones. It was built in the 30s. It has this lovely turret in the front, kind of a nod to Tudor architecture, but it was a little overgrown. You could barely see the turret from the street, and the inside was very drab and dreary. It was dark gray, and so it was very underwhelming at first. But we found that as we kept looking, we kept comparing every house to this one. And so in the end, we went for it, and here we are. And almost 7 years later, we have slowly updated it and improved it and decorated it in a way that we really love to be and to have friends over and entertain. I would say the biggest changes that we made, given that it's a 1930s home and it's got this lovely turret out front, that we added back actually a lot of details that the previous owner had taken away. So as we walk through, you'll see I added back in elliptical casings in the living room to some of the archways where they'd stripped away original moldings and tried to, make them these big, more modern openings. And then on the exterior, we went through a huge landscaping plan. We worked with Ted Gregory Henry Landscape. He's wonderful, but he really helped us transform the outside. I'm good on the inside. I'm less good on the outside. I know it looks good, but don't ask me to help you keep a plant alive. But the way the house is situated on the street, the way you see it from the street, the way we come in and out of it and can greet our friends outside is really, really wonderful, in addition to how you see the outside from when you're sitting inside. So that was a really big impact on the house. Well, here we are in our entry. It is a little bit of an unusual space because we have this 2-story space. We're inside the turret that's on the front of our house, but the floor plan, the footprint is pretty compact. So it doesn't allow for a ton of furniture or a ton of storage. So that was a little bit of a challenge working out when we moved in, but I solved it with a beautiful antique chest that holds, if you open these drawers, they are stuffed with board games and table linens. So it is a great storage piece. And we have a little tray that catches keys and chapstick and things like that when you come in the door. Over here, I knew I needed a bench that could be a place, where guests drop their handbag or you stop and tie your shoes before you walk out the door. But again, very small footprint, and so I needed something shallow. And my dear friend, Jessica Love, she's an antique dealer, she found this beautiful antique bench for me, and I put it in this Lee Joffa fabric, and I just love it. It kind of modernizes the old, blends the two. And then my husband and I, he actually was both an art history and business major. So we do have a fun time talking about creative things and looking at art, and this is a piece we picked out together. This is by an artist, Ashley Longshore, out of New Orleans, and she, if you know her work, it is all kinds of wacky and beautiful. But we found this one and felt like it was just perfect in here. These bluebirds kind of fly about, and they feel a little bit like they're flying around in this atrium, which is a really nice effect when you walk in. Over here, I have a little collection of artwork that I've collected from different people. This one is actually my grandmother that I referenced. She was a portrait artist. And this is a study she did a million years ago. This is a sweet artist out of South Carolina, Haley Matthews. And this, my dear friend Gina Julia did for me years ago, and I just love it. And then this is a lamp that was my grandmother's. So I have a little bit of everything in this very small space, but I think all of it is reflective of who we are as a family, and my husband and I, how we, kind of go about collecting things. As far as colors, when we moved in this house, this was another space that was very dreary. It was gray, it was bumpy, and despite having these 2 windows, it was still kind of dreary. So we skimmed it, just gave it a nice crisp coat of white paint so it could be just sort of the nice neutral backdrop and let a lot of light bounce around. You also look out on the outside, our landscaping that we did, and green and blue are my favorite colors. You probably see that when you look at my work, it comes out a lot. But I kind of went a little bit earthy, but still kind of made it a little bit modern. So this sort of almost a flame stitch, but it's a cut velvet, is a little bit more modern feeling against this antique bench. And the color, green, nature, kind of soothing. I think of green as almost a neutral. So it looks nice with the neutral rug, with the wood tones we have over here. And then of course we've got our funky art with the floral painting. So it's bold, but it's still quite elegant. And I think they all work together very well. Another element that we added that I think really honors the age of the home and the time period it was built was adding in these openings, these elliptical arches. My fellow neighbors over here, the following, I think 3 houses all next to me are all built in the 30s, and they all have these elliptical archways in them. And when we moved in, the previous owner, they were uncased, which kind of drives me crazy. And they were segmented, and to me, they didn't feel right with the house. And so eventually I had these made to fit in here. So I have one here and one in the living room that we'll see later. And I think just when you transition from the entryway to the living room, it just feels a little bit grander, beefier. There's a little bit more of a sense of arrival, and it really works with the spirit of the home. When people walk in our home, I want them to feel welcomed. I want them to feel the same things that I try to create for my family, which is, a place that's comfortable, a place that's classic, a place that's livable. As we walk through, you'll see our main living room. I mean, we could have cocktails here one evening with a friend, but on Saturday morning, there's Legos on the floor. So nothing is too precious. And I mean, while I want it to be beautiful, I ultimately want it to be livable. And I want all my friends to feel the same thing when they come in. Now we're in our living room, and as you can see, it's a very long, narrow living room. So working out a floor plan was a little bit of a challenge, but what we did is create multiple seating areas, which I think is a wonderful thing to do if you can in a living space. So in this living room, we have this lovely little area with the settee and the 2 slipper chairs and pretty little floor lamps. At night, I love to sit here in the evening with the floor lamps on. They give the soft glow and a little cocktail. It's so nice. Another piece of art that we have that my husband and I really like is this really cool contemporary piece by Will Berry. He's actually a relative of my husband, and this was a wedding gift he gave to us. It was actually on display in a gallery in Mexico City at one time, which is a really neat tale to tell. And we really enjoy looking at it. And I think color-wise, it's very happy in this room. The drapery, fun fact, I actually did these in our old house and brought them with me. And because our new house, the ceilings are lower, 1930s house, I had them hemmed, but they're actually a stain-resistant material with which kids is excellent because you can actually sometimes wipe off whatever little grubby things your kids leave on them. And I put this really pretty Schumacher tape down the side so that it's kind of a little tone-on-tone texture on there. All of this area is this lovely collection of things I've acquired that are vintage. So I found this at an estate sale, those at an auction clearance. The floor lamps I love, I got in Paris. They're actually similar to Iatesta Studio. And then the slipper chairs I actually found on Cherish, and I had them recovered in another stain-resistant velvet and put on this beautiful Samuel & Sons trim. And they are just very elegant, but still very livable with a family with little kids. So it's just a really cozy little spot to be. And a nice thing about the way the seating areas are arranged is that even if you're sitting over here, you can very easily talk to everyone sitting over here in the main area. So when we have grandparents in town and friends over, we can fit everyone and we don't have to all kind of be on top of each other, but we can all talk to each other, even if we're all spread out, which is really nice. So we have this really big, comfy sofa with, fluffy pillows. I've got all my tones of velvet. I always like to have a little velvet. This chair was actually in my husband's family, and I recovered it in this beautiful green floral. I love green and blue together, so you'll see that a lot. And over here, I've got a little collections of things that I've either inherited or found. So I found this beautiful mirror at an estate sale. These plates were actually my grandmother's. So another little piece that reminds me of her. And we have tons of books. So we collect art books and design books and fashion books, all kinds of things. So we've got a lot of that to look at as well. The slipper chairs I found through an estate sale, and I just love them. I've always loved the slope of them. They're kind of old school, but still very modern at the same time to me, especially in this sort of almost lacquered black finish. And you'll also notice I have layered some rugs in here. I put a hide on top of this very long rug. So this room is about, I think, 28 feet long. And it's not really the type of room that you could put 2 different rugs in and make it work. So I have one long continuous rug, and I put this hide because it's a little amorphous. It's not so rigid. And it just helps break up the space and add another layer of texture. And it's super durable with kids and a dog. So it has served us well. Once we moved in the house and I was working through colors, I felt this room called for a nice soft blue, and I tried many because blue is for some a hard color to nail down. If it's too light, it looks baby blue. If it's too dark, it, I don't know, can kind of look a little stale. And I found this color. It is a discontinued, but you can still have it mixed if you ask the right person. It's Pittsburgh Paint Limoges Blue. And I think during the day, it is just this lovely kind of light and airy color. But at night, it just really gets nice and dusty. And with the lamplight on, it's really lovely to be here in the evening with friends, or even with the kids, you know, hanging out. And as we walk through the living room, you will see we're starting to get closer to the dining room. And I felt that the space needed to open up a little more so that we could have a transition. So over here is where I have this lovely console. It was my husband's family's, beautifully carved marble top. And I've kind of modernized it with some brass lamps and kind of a wall mirror that's a little bit of a nod to a Carl Springer. It's kind of a fuchsia green. And then our sweet dog Lola taking her nap below. And then you have this open space here, which allows you to kind of move nicely into the dining room. This is actually a gramophone cabinet that was my husband's grandfather's, and he had it converted into a bar, which is kind of fun to have in here. And up above, I have a collection of, these were plates that were my grandmother's. I found that lovely little painting of the moon at night from an antique dealer, and some big jars. And I think that they look really nice with all the blue and white, and it's kind of a nice layer on top of this tall piece. And then as we keep going, I love my skirted table. I usually have the same assortment of things on here, kind of like my stacks of books, but every now and then the objects do change. So for example, I've slowly collected a few of these precious little malachite boxes. I do love to open them up. This one's so pretty on the inside with its gilded interior. And then this pretty little antique book with fish in it. My husband is a fisherman, and this one has these really beautiful engravings in it that are nice to look at. And a skirted table is great for hiding all kinds of things. So I have a handful of vases and some yoga mats hiding under there. So pro tip, that's a good thing to have if you need a little extra storage. Over here, I've got a couple little things that kind of are a nod to our tendency to collect. This is a painting I found on a trip to Paris with one of my very dear friends. I bought this for my husband for his birthday, and it's got all these wonderful things. He loves oysters and crawfish and port, and I just thought it was so wonderful. So he gets to see it every day, as do I. I bought this chair from a wonderful antique dealer that I love at the Antiques and Garden Show in Nashville. And this artist right here is Summers Randolph. He is in Tennessee, and he just carves these amazing pieces out of wood and marble and alabaster, and we're lucky to have one of them. So now we'll head on into the dining room, which is not far away. Well, decorating your own home is infinitely, I mean, it is 100 million times harder than decorating for a client or designing for a client. Like, fundamentally, you start with the same parameters. You have floor plans that can only accommodate so much furniture or so many built-ins or what have you. And you have some sense of a budget. How much are you willing to spend? So those two things you kind of start with the same. However, a client usually have a timeline, and they usually have some parameter in terms of what they want their house to feel like. For me, I'm always looking, I am always searching, I am always finding and discovering, and so I always make these little pivots when I am designing my own home, and it is very hard to come to a final answer for anything I do. But sometimes it's aggravating for myself because I just want to make a decision, but then sometimes you end up finding just this little gem that you hadn't thought about because you had the time to go look and discover and find. And that is fun, even though sometimes it can be a little draining. And here we are in the dining room. As you can see, the opening to the living room is pretty big, so they're very open to each other. One thing that I did in here that I'm very happy we did, I showed you in the entry how we added the elliptical arch. We did the same thing here. This opening was actually over 2 feet wider than it is now, and I just felt like I had this runway of furniture and it drove me nuts. So I actually made the opening a little smaller. It's still very big, and added this elliptical arch in. And again, it just makes the transition feel a little bit more special. And I mean, the house feels more substantial, and I think that the design element suits the house really well. In here, I have on the walls this lovely paper weave wallpaper. It's actually a vinyl, so it's wipeable, which is nice. And these beautiful panels that are de Gournay. I mentioned my friend Jessica Love, the antique dealer. She used to source these beautiful vintage panels, and she found these for me. And when I saw them, it was just, I didn't really have this room quite figured out, but it just clicked. That clicked with the blue in the living room. I knew I wanted to use these chairs that I'd had in our previous home, and they just all sung together. So I knew it was meant to be. And they're a nice gold silk with the hand-painted chinoiserie kind of design. And I think they kind of glow when the light is just right, which is really, really pretty when you're in here having a meal. So the mirror here is also something I found in Paris. On the same trip, I found my other painting with my good friend. And then this fun little piece of art, my grandmother, who was the antique dealer, she actually had lots of artist friends and would trade art with other friends. So this is a piece she traded with another artist, and I now have it now. So I kind of love knowing that about it, in addition to thinking that it's really quite beautiful. Another fun piece, I found these stools at a thrift store, and I was just like, wow, they're really a little bit bold and gilded, but I just knew I could add this cushion and it was going to look great in front of these panels, and it did. So again, kind of a little bit when you're designing for yourself, there's always this little bit of the element of the unknown, and you find something that just works in a way you hadn't really mapped out for yourself. And it's usually comes together really well if you let yourself have that opportunity. I do love to entertain. I love to set a table. My friends joke it's maybe like another love language I have. I think, I talked about holidays with my grandparents and my mother, and how the table was always a really important part of those gatherings. And so I guess I just carry on that tradition. And this is chock full of china, placemats, all the things. And so it's kind of a little micro way to be really creative, but it's temporary, and you can mix and match and do all kinds of fun things. So I went a little green here for you guys, and I mixed the chargers from our wedding china. The dinner plate is actually a discontinued Dior china. They don't make it anymore. The Dior malachite that I collected one by one over the years. And then these pretty sweet floral plates were actually my grandmother's. And so it's really nice to mix all those different time periods and, kind of the modern with the really traditional, and it all works. Another layer on the table, I do love rattan. So I have these really fun octagonal rattan chargers and these pretty napkin rings, which kind of going with my love of green is like green is a neutral, so is rattan. And I think you can mix, your fine silver and china with all of it, and it works really well. These are, nice hem-stitch green linens. This was my maternal grandmother, and then these candlesticks were actually my paternal grandmother. So I've got a little bit of them in everything I do. The green goblets I found at an estate sale, but I only got 6 of them, and I went down an internet rabbit hole until I found 4 more on eBay. So now I have a set of 10, and it's very exciting. Some other pieces of china that are really fun to me. This is the cabinet of china, and fun to set a table with. I do love these pretty Madaheta sacred bird. I just think they're so fun and such a beautiful shade of orange, which is a color I don't really decorate very often with. And then I also love these heron greenfish scale. They come out quite a bit. These were part of our wedding china, and they're fun to use and think about how long we've had them. The chandelier I love. It is a little bit of a statement. It's a little big in this room, and I love it. It's kind of a little bit whimsical, a little bit modern, a little bit retro, a little bit glam. To me, it really finishes the room nicely, and I like this kind of organic sweeping element, and I think it works well with kind of our viney chinoiserie panels, and the fact that I often am using, like greens and florals in some of my settings. And now we'll head into the kitchen. Follow me. Okay, well, here we are in our kitchen. As you can see, we kept it pretty light and bright and very classic. When we moved in, a selling point was that this kitchen has this huge island, and it's a pretty spacious kitchen, but again, very dreary. There were dark gray cabinets, this very dark some kind of granite countertop, and this really bright green tile. And that just did not work for us. And the walls, again, were bumpy gray. So we sort of just neutralized everything, painted all the cabinetry in the walls the same kind of creamy white, and brought in this Arabescato marble and a glazed brick backsplash. So it has a little bit of an earthy kind of textural element, but still is very classic and clean and bright and happy. Thankfully, all the cabinets were in great shape, so we kept those, and it was mostly just resurfacing. The pendants, I love. They are actually ceramic. If you touch them, they're ceramic from Duval Kitchen in England. And the faucet is also Roll, which is another English hardware maker. So again, we collect things. My husband also loves to cook, and he collects cookbooks. So this is not even all of our cookbooks that we have in our home, but this is our starting collection here. But there are all kinds, all cuisines, gotten them in different places after having visited different restaurants. But he loves to pull these out, and we'll sit at the counter. We have this nice big counter and come up with a menu. So I'm pretty lucky. I get to reap the benefit of that hobby. Over here is our lovely little breakfast nook, small but mighty, I always say. This table, a little more mod, but I love it. It's very wipeable, as are the rattan chairs. They're also wipeable. And again, we kind of look out to the front area that has the nice landscaping, and it's a nice little place to perch with your coffee in the morning, kind of gather your thoughts. And we have most of our dinners with our son here at the end of the day, which is really nice. If we move over here, you'll see we also have these really great glass cabinets with a lot of glassware. He collects the cookbooks, I collect the glassware. And they're all different. Some are, again, like champagne flutes from our wedding, and then others are, I found these vintage goblets right here that had a J in them, and I just thought that was so cool. So they were meant to be ours, and I brought them home. This really sweet silver tea set that I found in Paris, and I just had to have it. And it sits there, and it's just beautiful. And some vintage champagne coupes. I love anything out of a coupe, so they're part of the collection as well. Another element that we changed was all of the cabinet hardware. Very simple change to make, especially if, luckily, we had single hole cabinet knobs. But what was here before was this almost like a plastic. I don't know. It was not very good. And we put in nice polished nickel hardware to work with our polished nickel faucet, and I think it marries beautifully with the marble counters and then the glazed brick backsplash for a very classic clean kitchen. I would say that I probably loved design before I knew that I could love design. I've always been creative, and growing up, I was surrounded by some pretty strong-minded and creative and sort of home-focused women. So my maternal grandmother was a portrait artist, and she had a great eye for color and a flair for kind of unusual things, pretty things, just whatever she just had a really good eye for putting things together. And growing up, we always went to her home for Christmas, and she made a point of setting a beautiful table and really making the house just welcoming and pretty and well appointed. And my paternal grandmother, she was actually an antique dealer. So she also kept a very well appointed home. And she always had these beautiful objects and art and furniture pieces. And from her, I didn't know at the time, but I started to observe all these things together. Then fast forward, and my mother actually studied architectural and historic preservation. So growing up, I was around that and all of her architect friends and her historic preservation friends, real estate people. And so it was always around me. So I think it just kind of was second nature to always be thinking about homes and how we live in them, how they fit in our community. And then going forward later in life, I didn't realize that was, something that other people don't naturally think about. So I went off to school. I got a very practical degree. I went to school in Nashville. I went to Vanderbilt University, and then I moved to New York City, and I met my now husband there, who was from Nashville. I did super corporate things, not what I'm doing now. And when we hit our New York expiration date, we thought, okay, we love Nashville, so we'll go back and we'll live there. And we did, and we bought a house, and I slowly started fixing it up, and I really enjoyed it. I just had so much fun kind of doing it on the side. And my friends started noticing that I could do it. And so they would ask me to come over and help them with their living room or their dining room or whatever they were struggling with. And I thought, sure, I'll do it. So one day I was in my friend's dining room. She's very to the point, and I'm standing there holding this napkin on the wall. It's just the perfect shade of blue, and we're going to figure out how to make this all work. And she just looked at me deadpan and said, "Why don't you do this for a living?" And I didn't have an answer. Nobody had ever asked me that. It hadn't really been presented to me as a profession. And so I thought, I just didn't have an answer. And so I sort of did my soul searching a little bit, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to give this a go. Worst case, I don't like it, I go back to something else. Well, I went back to Omar College of Design, which is now part of Belmont in Nashville, and I loved it. All of it. So I ended up starting my own business in Nashville, and the rest is history. So, and when we moved here, I just kind of moved my business here, and I still have an outpost there in Nashville. So I've just been building ever since, and it's been really, really fun. And here is our downstairs powder room. It is a little jewel box of a room. It's barely 5 by 5. When we moved in, it was kind of a muddy yellow, and it had this strange brown tile on the floor. It just didn't have much life in it. And so I just started over. I put in this pretty tile floor, a little hex Carrera, a pedestal sink, and this really beautiful wallpaper. This neighborhood that we're in is called Boulevard Oaks, and we have all these beautiful oak trees. So I felt like this was just like the perfect nod to the neighborhood we're in and where our house is situated. And I put this pretty blue. I just wrapped all the trim and the ceiling and everything in this complementary color. And you'll notice the mirror in there, the little petite Louis Philippe. I found that at Round Top, which is a really wonderful antique fair outside of Houston, for those of you who are in the know. And the art on the wall, again, kind of our bit of collecting put in here. The two pieces above the toilet are Cape Cod Artists, which is a place where our family actually goes in the summer. So it's nice to have that nod in here. And then the artist on this wall is actually Paul Colvin. He's a kind of mid-century artist, and my mother gave us that. And I think it looks really wonderful in there. Great, now let's head upstairs and I'll show you our primary bedroom. Here we are in our primary bedroom. I love this room. It is very calming and serene and soothing. When pulling this room together, very quickly after we moved in, or when we looked at the house really, the one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that this room has 5 windows, and we have a lot of trees around us. So actually, when you come in the spring, we're kind of in Houston's version of winter right now. So our crepe myrtle has no blooms on it, but when it is lush and green, we have that plus all these oak trees around us, and it feels a little bit like you're up in your own little tree house. and you just have all this nice kind of restorative green around you, which is really nice. So I wanted to sort of carry that in here, and I brought in a lot of these watery kind of blues and greens. So it's like a little nature, water, air, greenery. And I think that the net result is a very soothing space. The walls are this really pretty kind of pale aqua blue. Aqua might sound a little bright. Pretty headboard and a carried joist fabric. My favorite Matouk bedding has served me so well. And these really beautiful silk drapery, which, you know, kind of have a little bit of an iridescence to them. And so they have sort of adds to that kind of watery, soothing effect. I love that I was able to put this in here. This is actually my grandmother, the antique dealer. This was her desk, and I keep a little studio, an office studio outside of the house. So sometimes when I come home and I just need like a place to perch and look at emails, I'm often here, and I can hide all kinds of papers and stuff in the drawers below, which is really nice. The chair I found in Paris on my lovely trip where I acquired things I thought I would sell to clients, and then I ended up keeping them for myself. And I took this fabric, this really nice cotton and tout, and I repeated it in a few places. So although it's not kind of the green that's around us, it's still very organic and earthy, and I think it adds to that whole, again, kind of serene, restorative, kind of nature effect. Another piece I love in here is this piece of art, this piece of very contemporary art. This room is very traditional, I think, you know, lots of antiques, but again, I always like to inject a little bit of something contemporary and kind of fun. And someone once told me they thought this painting looked like, you know, you were kind of trying to finish a thought that was getting away, and that always stuck with me. So I sometimes look at it and when I'm thinking, I'm like, where's the thought that's going away? So I love having that in here, and it's contemporary, but it's still calming to me. I have this beautiful antique commode that has this really pretty brass detailing. So although it's an older piece, I think that little finishing touch kind of is a little bit of a modern finish to it. I have some vintage alabaster lamps, antique mirror, these beautiful colored engravings that I think work so well with the colors in here. And this is where really every day I kind of finish my morning getting ready. So I'll spritz of perfume, check my jewelry, and then I can be out the door. So, and the last thing I want to show you in this room is this wall. It's pretty much the largest wall we have to display something in here, given that we have all these windows. And this is an antique divider panel that my grandmother had, one of my grandmothers. I don't know what it is. It looks like Zubair. I'll never know, and that's fine. I just love it. But it's got this wonderful green kind of landscape scene with the watery element at the bottom and the trees. And I just feel like it just sort of completes the circle of the treehouse that we are in up here. And they sit over these lovely stools that I think are just so chic that I found. Another Paris find, and they're in a kind of nubby Pierre Fray boucle fabric. My favorite thing about this home that is not really a concrete, tangible thing. We did bring home our babies in this home. So our two lovely children, I have a son that's almost 5 and a daughter that just turned 1. And this home is where we started our family. So that is probably my number one favorite thing about this home. From a design standpoint, probably my favorite thing about the house isn't one singular element, but it's the fact that I do love old homes. So I love that this home is an older home, but we have made it a really easy place to live in a modern way. So we've married, you know, the lovely historic or architectural elements that I referenced before with, you know, all the modern kitchen things. So I love that we've fused those and still can live in something that's got a little bit of a soul in it. And now here we are in my son's room. He is about to turn 5. And this room, he's lucky, this is a really big room. And that meant we got to do twin beds. These were actually my sister and my twin beds when we were younger. And so very lucky I get to use them right now. But I just went real sweet boy in here. So it's a lot of blue and white and red. In his nursery, I had this scarf, which you'll see in a minute. It's this really lovely Hermes scarf framed with hot air balloons and little planes. And so I kind of went with the airspace theme and a little bit of a red, white, and blue. And so we have, just our blue and white gingham and our airplanes, and then my sweet old beds, blue and white striped rug, and beautiful chair over here. And then this bow front chest was actually in my husband's family, and it's nice that we can use it for him. Above it is the scarf that used to be in his nursery, and we just brought it in here and made it part of his new room. And now you've seen my son's room, so let's go take a look at my daughter's nursery. And here we are in my daughter's nursery. As you can see, this room is very girly. I didn't go outright pink. We've got this really, really lovely blue and green kind of viney sweet pea wallpaper. But although we've got blue flowers, I do have plenty of pink. We have, our fun floral bedding on her crib, and as well as on the bed. The bed was also an antique bed that was my grandmother's, and I recovered it in this really sweet blue ticking. On the wall here, you'll see a portrait that is actually my grandmother's. And that is who I am named after, as well as my daughter. So it's really fitting that she's in here. Over here, we just have a few little sweet things, lovely pink lampshade, vintage mirror, all very floral and just very feminine, but without being overly girly. One other thing over here that I think is really fun to point out, it took me a while to figure out what to put on this wall, but I found, again, my friend Jessica Love, she just finds these wonderful antique things, and these are 19th century hand watercolored botanicals, and I think they are fabulous in here. In addition to, right over the crib, I found these drawings, these fashion drawings in Paris like years ago on my first trip to Paris with my family when I was much younger, and I just thought they were so cool. And then they kind of floated around in my house, and I didn't have a place for them until now. And so I think that they're just perfect in here for a little girl's room. The drapery actually are part of why we do have some blue in here. I had them when this was my son's nursery, and the walls were wallpapered in a blue linen. And I knew that I loved what I did with the drapery with this little Greek key design in the corners with this double tape. And I couldn't bear to part with them, so I found this beautiful floral wallpaper that just worked with it so well and just turned the boy drapery into the girl drapery. Home, again, at the end of the day, it's just a place that brings you comfort and joy and nourishment. So it's a crazy world we live out there. There's a lot of noise around us. And I think it is so important to have that place that it doesn't have to be grand or anything, but if it gives you comfort, it brings you joy, and the surroundings can nourish you in some way, I think that's the best combo right there. Well, Homeworthy, it's been so much fun showing you around, but it's time for me to go. Until next time.
Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Paloma. Welcome to my home in Houston.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Paloma Contreras. I'm an interior designer, and you're in my home in Houston, Texas. So we moved into this house 2 years ago this month, actually, and we purchased it 2.5 years ago after looking for almost a year. So around that time, I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. She was a little under a year old, and we had outgrown our last place. So it was time to move to a bigger house and also to a different neighborhood. So we were previously in Houston's Montrose neighborhood, which is wonderful and artsy and like super cool, but there weren't a ton of children on the street. And so we wanted to be in a more family-friendly neighborhood and decided we wanted to live in West University Place, which is basically like Mayberry in the middle of Houston. It's, 10 minutes from downtown, 5 minutes from the medical center, but it really has that small town feel. So we looked and looked for, like I said, almost a year and weren't finding anything. It was a really sort of competitive time in the marketplace. And I'd all but given up and was starting to toy with the idea of building a house and just coming to terms with the fact that it would take longer than we initially thought. And as that happened, I got a call from my realtor who said, this house is coming on the market. It's a pocket listing. Do you want to see it? I can get you in first. And so we came. And being a decorator, I personally love a more traditional floor plan. I love a center hallway. I love having proper rooms rather than like big open spaces, which had become so popular in terms of new builds. And that was a lot of what we were seeing. And I also grew frustrated by the fact that as a designer, I feel like I kind of know too much. Like I can identify what the fixtures are and like the quality of the materials and what those things cost. And they weren't always matching up to the price tags. So when we walked into this house, it was like almost an instant yes, because the bones were great. I knew I could make it my own. The previous owners had made some updates to the kitchen and the bathroom. It's a 1987 house, so it's not an old house, but because in that time period, people were building more traditional layouts that you would see in, say, a house from the 1930s. It really ticked a lot of boxes for us. And we, almost immediately knew that this was the house for us.
One of the things that initially drew us to this home was the impression that it made immediately upon walking into it. I loved how wide this entryway was. It felt very elegant and welcoming and was great for entertaining. And then, of course, on either side, you have this very traditional floor plan with the living room on one side and the dining room on the other. But another thing that was really sort of attracted to me was that we had traditional oak floors in this house rather than like the big wide plank, more distressed looking floors that have become so popular, which I love and we use in projects all the time. But for my own house, I wanted something that felt a little bit more classic. So it was fun that the stain on the floors was beautiful. And I also loved that the original floors to the house featured this Versailles pattern with sort of like a parquet inlay pattern in the entryway, which sort of makes it feel like a special space rather than just a pass-through. I'll show you one of my favorite pieces in the house. I mentioned that I love antiques, and this piece is very special to me because I'm pretty sure it was the first antique I ever bought. So I found this at an antiques fair in Paris several years ago and fell in love with it. And I was actually on an antique shopping tour. So I learned how to buy antiques from these wonderful women from Atlanta on this trip with all these other ladies, and fell in love with this particular commode. And since starting my store 6 years ago, I have bought countless antique French chests, but I've never come across one that was as beautiful as this one. So it has this gorgeous marquetry inlay on the drawer fronts that is so special. And of course, most often the tops are added on later on. So this is probably a newer top, but it's beautiful narrow Marquina marble, which I think really gives the space a graphic touch. I always say it's important to have something black or dark in any space because it sort of keeps it from floating away and gives it a little sense of gravitas. And this is really just like a little tableau of things that I love, some favorite books, these rock crystal objects I also found at the flea market in Paris. There's a little bronze like sculpture that I found at the flea market in Paris and brought home with me on a trip. And we have lots of plants and myrtle topiaries throughout the house. This beautiful lamp is by one of my favorite makers, Christopher Spitzmiller, and he does these gorgeous glazes with beautiful depth of color. And, one of the things that I think is really special about a house and how it sort of sets the tone and tells a story about the people who live there is the art. And I tend to really love abstract, kind of graphic, modern art, contemporary art. And I feel like it's a really nice foil to some of the more feminine or traditional elements of my design work. So this piece in particular is by a French artist named Jacques Nestlé. It's from the 1960s. I also bought it on one of these trips to France and have since collected a few other pieces of his. So there's one by the Tudor that's his. This is actually his, and this is a funny piece. I saw it when I was on one of these trips and fell in love with it. I loved this silver leaf frame and just how striking and bold this black canvas was. But I understand it's not for everybody. I remember on a visit when I first hung it in our old house, my sister-in-law came in. My sister-in-law, bless her, I love her so much, but we're very different. She's a high school science teacher. And she like went up to it and touched it and was like, what? Like, this is art, but to thine own self be true. It's art to me and I love it. And then this is a really cool piece. It's by a Japanese artist and it's contemporary from 2019, an artist named Kamiya. And these are actually pieces of steel that have been painted and manipulated and arranged in these really cool compositions that feel like an abstract painting. So as you walk in from the entry, you can either go left into the living room or right into the dining room. The living room is one of my favorite spaces. In this house, I've really wanted to challenge myself to use more color. Our last house was a little bit more neutral and higher contrast, and I wanted to sort of play into a more feminine palette. I think part of it was having a young daughter and just loving and leaning into very girly things. So what was interesting about this house was, I didn't realize this when we bought it, the windows are very shallow. And so that made it difficult to hang traditional drapery. I think we only have true curtains or drapery in 3 rooms, and everywhere else, because of the depth of the windows, we had to do shades. So that presented a fun design challenge. And I was very inspired by one of my design heroes, Birgrenny, and in his temple, which he has in the English countryside, it's this beautiful garden folly that is referred to as a temple. It's temple pink, and he has these beautiful balloon shades that are much more ornate than these, but that was kind of my inspiration. And so the jumping off point really for the room. So we went with these silk pink balloon shades or London shades that you see throughout the room. And I also really wanted to keep it kind of crisp and neutral to let the color and the pattern really come to light. So you'll notice like there's a great wool carpet or rug that is a very light color, sort of a beige. There's a white sofa, also very feminine with this box pleated skirt. I just felt like it was very timeless and classic and pretty. And then on top of that, we have this beautiful cabinet out floral printed fabric on a pair of pillows, and then these sweet green velvet pillows as well that feature one of my take trims from my Schumacher collection. This one's the Margot Fret.
So the sofa is paired with these slipper chairs that are in the Louis XVI style, so as classic as it gets. And I've upholstered them in this fabric that gets a lot of questions. People always ask about it. It's one of my favorites. It's Brunswick Fille Bromo Velvet in this beautiful green colorway. It has a lot of dimension and texture and I don't know, like 3 or 4 different hues of green. So it's a really beautiful fabric that feels really dimensional. The coffee table is a contemporary piece. It's from the Lacquer Company and was designed by Birgrenny, that design hero of mine that I mentioned. And it just has a little tableau of things that I love. This end table is Baguesse, and it's vintage. I found this in Paris as well. And then I paired that on the other side with a super contemporary little accent table, this sort of brass cube that I think is sort of sexy and adds like an unexpected kind of disco touch to the room that you wouldn't expect from something that felt otherwise so buttoned up. I think it's always important to have an element of surprise. This console here was actually my parents' as far back as the 70s. I think they had it in their place before they had me, and then it was in our house growing up forever. I remember it being kind of like a lime green, and then they gave it to me. I've painted it a few different colors, and when we designed this room, I felt like it needed that kind of darker foil that we talked about. So we painted it, we lacquered it this chocolate brown, and I've layered it with, you know, some things that I love, a vintage lamp, a couple of sculptures, and we always have some live plants everywhere. This mirror is also very classic. It's a Georgian mirror. It dates back to the 1800s, and I bought this at auction for a song, and it was in my old house and worked really well here. And then we have some club chairs that are super comfortable. So this is a room where we really like, when we entertain people, we gather here. This is where we're having a drink before dinner. And this is also where my daughter likes to like come and chat, just the two of us every now and then. Or if she's upset about something, she always runs to this sofa and I run after her to comfort her. So we do use this room pretty much on a daily basis. But it's, you know, certainly our formal room that we don't hang out in terms of like playing or eating, but more for entertaining. This piece here is really special to me. This painting is from an artist from New Orleans named Alexis Walter, who I've known for, I guess, 10 years now probably. And she and I worked on a show house together. So I did my very first show house in 2016 in New Orleans, and she loaned this beautiful piece to me. And at the end, she realized how much I loved it, and she gave it to me as a gift. And ever since, I've bought lots of pieces from her for different projects, and we carry her work in my shop. So it has a lot of special meaning, and I just love the colors in it. It's, you know, sort of soft, but also punchy with that bit of chartreuse and the black, the graphite coming through, those pops of red. So it really complements this room. Again, to keep it from not going so soft. The same is true of the marble that we did around the fireplace. When we bought the house, it was still the original 1980s, like shiny green marble. And I wanted it to feel a little bit more graphic and updated contemporary. So we did a Nero Marquina in a honed finish that I think sort of grounds the room and adds kind of a masculine element to it that it really needs. And to that end, the light fixture in this room is also a lot more contemporary. This is the Comtesse chandelier from my collection for visual comfort. I love the scale of it. I love the drama of it, but it works really well in rooms like this that don't have super high ceilings, and still allows you to make a cool statement. And it's really nice in the evenings if we're entertaining other friends in here, adults only, where we like dim all the lights down and just have that sort of reflecting light onto the ceiling and have some low lamp light. It just sets a really nice mood. But speaking of ceiling heights, I'll show you these other pieces that are also very, very special to me. So I have this series of mixed media works by an artist out of Birmingham named Jane Timberlake Cooper. In my previous house, if you are familiar with my work, you may have seen them in my old dining room, and they were a series of 9. So they were stacked in a grid of 9, 3 across and 3 high. Unfortunately, this house has much lower ceilings than our old house did, so I had to scale that down to 6. But I love how they work in unison as a series to have such visual impact. They're very soft, you know, they're mostly white. There's some graphite and charcoal coming through, and you see those bits. They're kind of Twombly inspired. Cy Twombly is my favorite artist, so anything that is reminiscent of the movement in his work is always very evocative to me. But I think that when you group pieces together, they just have such tremendous impact, even if the pieces themselves are quieter, such as these. And I'll show you before we pop into the bar, another piece that I love by another artist that is near and dear to me, Kimberly Moore from Florida. She is really cool in the sense that her kind of thing, the way that she approaches art is by starting with the frame, which I think is really interesting. She sources vintage and antique frames. I mean, I don't know that that's her exact process, but she sources antique and vintage frames and then paints these really cool modern and abstract compositions. Sometimes they're very quiet and neutral, and other times they're bold and beautiful, kind of like this one. And there was something about this particular composition that felt a little sort of Picasso or Moreau inspired to me. And again, I felt like the colors worked really well in a room that is otherwise like so light and pretty and fresh. The renovation was super quick. It happened lightning fast because we had taken possession of the house on March 1st, and we needed to be out of our house, our previous house, by the end of March. So my contractor was wonderful, and we got a plan together, and really thought about what was critical path in terms of the most disruptive things that we wouldn't want to be living in the house for. So tile work, paint, that kind of thing. And then other things like, you know, changing out light fixtures and cabinet hardware and wallpaper. Those things came over time. So in those 30 days, we essentially painted every room. The kitchen was remodeled by the previous owners with an architect and a different designer in terms of the layout of the space because it was kind of choppy. But we went in and updated the paint, all of the materials, all of the surfaces, so the tile backsplash, the countertops, all of those things, the hardware, the lighting. And we did that in all of the bathrooms as well, except for the primary bathroom. So I think if you're going through a renovation, it's really important to be realistic about your timeline and your budget. And I say this to my design clients all the time. You know, you can have the world, but then your budget has to be unlimited and your timeline has to just go on forever. So obviously we know those resources are finite, so it's super critical to prioritize where you want to spend the bulk of your time, energy, and obviously resources. So for us, it was all of those big things. And then we just sort of, you know, we moved in and it was painted and the bathrooms were done. And those were things that allowed us to then take our time making it our own, bringing in new wallpaper and drapery and obviously our furniture and our lighting and all of that. So if you'll follow me into the bar, I'll show you a little bit of the space. So this room was added on by the previous owners of the house. I believe this was a closet before. It was expanded and they configured it and obviously added all of the cabinet work and the refrigerator and all of that. But it was painted kind of like an army green, which was lovely, but it wasn't the vibe that I wanted. And I really wanted this room to feel like a little jewel box moment. So we painted it this beautiful peacock blue and Hollandic paint from Fine Paints of Europe, so it has that beautiful lacquer finish. And truth be told, we don't use this space a ton unless we're entertaining, but it's just fun to have, and it's an opportunity to, you know, display some pretty glassware and some artwork as well. I always talk about like styling shelves, and that can be in a bar or in a living space. I'll show you my other shelves shortly. I think it's really important to always have varying heights of things and not to just have glassware solely displayed on your bar shelf. So you'll see we have like interesting objects and boxes and little pieces of art that are tucked in and sort of leaning. And I think that that makes the space or the shelves feel a lot more dynamic. And you'll see things like from our travels, you know, we collect matchbooks from different dinners and restaurants that we go to. So that always has like a little bit of a special personal touch. Part of what inspired the choice for this color was I love these sort of Prussian blues that you see. Again, I'm such a Francophile. I feel like everything goes back to Paris, but those beautiful high sheen doors that you see as you're walking through the streets, so often they're in these gorgeous shades of blue. I love Prussian blue in particular because it has a little bit of green in it, so it's not too preppy. So it feels moody. It really sets kind of like a vibe. Again, I felt like this could be a jewel box moment and kind of like a sexy foil to the femininity of the living room, but it also complements, shortly you'll see the family room as well, which is a much more casual space, but it really works with the color palette in both of those rooms and it's tucked in between them. So I always say there has to be sort of like a common thread that ties the various rooms together. They can each tell their own story, but they have to be part of the same book at the end of the day. Join me in the family room. So aside from the kitchen, the family room is a space that we spend the most time in as a family. The three of us, this is where you'll find us on Saturday morning, afternoon, weeknights. This is where we hang out and play with our little girl, Margot, who's 3.5. I really kept her in mind when I was designing this space. Knowing that we had formal spaces in the house, I very intently wanted this to be a room that she could just be free in and be comfortable in and play. So we set it up with a pair of sofas. These are actually sofas that I already had. They've been reupholstered 3 times. So that's like one thing that you can take away from this is invest in the best quality upholstery that you can, because it will live on with you for many, many years if you buy good quality. So these are by a maker called Varellin. It's the Hannah sofa. And I have, like I said, reupholstered them 3 times. They started out white, then they were moss green velvet, and now they're this sort of dusty blue performance velvet that we have here. And you can always have your cushions restuffed as well if they start to lose shape. So just super important to invest in the best quality that you can. But we had the 2 sofas already and sort of laid out the room this way instead of having 2 sofas across from each other as you traditionally would see in many floor plans, because this allowed a little bit more breathing room and space for Margot to play. And then rather than having a traditional wooden coffee table, which I previously had when she was learning to walk and it would make me very nervous, I had this custom ottoman made, and it's fully upholstered on the top, and then it has a shelf on the bottom which is filled with baskets, and those have all kinds of toys and magnet tiles and puzzles and things. So all of her things are easily accessible and we can play at any given moment, but we can also make the room look neat very quickly, which was important to me. So yeah, we hang out here all the time, but of course we still have some fun art in here. This series is Victor Vasarely. It's a series called Phantoms, and I had these framed and I just loved sort of the graphic composition of them. And growing up, we actually had some close family friends that were very much like grandparents to me, and I remember they had some Vasarely pieces, which I didn't know at the time, like as a little kid, but in hindsight, like I now realize that's what they had in their house, and I guess that made an impression on me, and so I'm still drawn to that as an adult. But you know, everything's very casual in here. The sofa fabric is performance. We have these great linen pillows that I had made and some fun fabrics, this Jane Shelton fabric. And it reminded me kind of like of a Marimekko print, but on a smaller scale. And so I liked sort of the vintage nod that gave. And then this beautiful, Katie Lead print that's sort of Indian inspired, like a block printed textile. I love the blues and greens for this space. Those are colors that, you know, we're all drawn to because it's what you find in nature. They're the colors that clients request the most from me. So I'm always tickled when somebody wants pink or red or something different, but I love blues and greens, and obviously they're very easy to live with. The fabric on the ottoman is also performance. The rug is 100% wool, so super easy to clean. So all of that was super, super important because this is where we spend so much time. And then you'll see I have a lot of books. This is just a portion of them. Because this house has lower ceilings than our old house did, I also had a big bank of shelves at the old house, but I think there were more shelves and they were significantly taller. I actually had to downscale quite a bit. So that was quite the challenge. But you'll see the shelves are really filled with a variety of things. And I think the number one mistake people make when they're styling bookshelves is that they forget the books. And so then they're just filled with like random tchotchkes and pottery and like an object. And that's great. Like those things are important and they certainly add interest to shelves and texture and color and whatnot. But they can't be the only things. So even if you're not a huge reader, pretend that you are and buy books that are interesting to you on topics that are of interest to you. Collect books when you travel. That's an easy souvenir to bring home. A lot of my books are travel, houses, design, of course. But it's just a variety of books that I've collected over the years, and then pottery that I've picked up on my travels, framed family photos. You'll see pieces of art that are leaning and different like objects, and I just feel like having that dimension, that sort of layer adds interest and makes them feel less flat, because it is a lot of space, and if all of the books were going the same direction, it just starts to feel really heavy. So it is important to have some books standing, some on their spines like this, to have kind of a pyramid effect when you're styling a shelf. So just imagine you're drawing a triangle. Does the eye go up at any point? That's going to make for a more successful styling moment or a more impactful vignette, and something where like the eye is able to travel and bounce around versus just like being flat the whole time. So yeah, that's one of the things that I think we're really good at is styling shelves, both at our design firm and our shop. This is one of the few rooms, one of the 3, that has actual drapery or curtains in it, that the windows allowed for that. So the former owners of this home worked with a wonderful architect locally, the Kelly Cusimano. Cusimano Architect is his Instagram. And they bumped this room out. So this was a den, and it was sort of enclosed and kind of dark. I've seen the listing photos from 2 times ago. So when the people who sold it to us, when they bought it from the original owners. And it was a much smaller space. But interestingly, they really only added, I want to say it was like from here to there. They bumped the room out a little bit, like it might have been a few feet, but it made a huge impact in terms of opening up the space and allowing for a better flow and more possibilities for furniture layouts. And so these windows and doors along the backside of the house are new, which allowed us to hang drapery. And this drapery features one of the tape trims from my collection from Schumacher. This is the Porte Parisienne, again, inspired by Paris. It was a door detail that I saw. It was like made out of rivets that I thought was super interesting. And it inspired me to translate that into something that was super usable in a variety of applications. So that's where we got that. And we have this lovely view of our garden. I live in the West University Place neighborhood, and the thing that makes it so special is the proximity to central Houston, downtown Houston, the Med Center. It's a great location. It is also like a small town. It's annexed. It's its own municipality. So we have a lot of benefits in that sense. But where we make a sacrifice is we have much smaller lots. So we don't have huge backyards, but we get to really know our neighbors because everybody's out on the street and, you talk to people. And I think it really fosters a sense of community. So we don't have a huge yard, but it's really lovely, especially in the spring with the wisteria and the azaleas and everything blooming. And we have lots of boxwoods as well. I think it's really important when you're setting up a space or designing a floor plan to think about, and this is not something that I made up, but something that I learned from Bunny Williams, another one of my design heroes, that you should always have a surface handy. Every seat should have a surface handy on which to place a drink. So again, it just goes back to comfort and graciousness, like being a good host, anticipating the needs of the people living in the house, yourself, if you're designing your own home. Is there a place for me to set my drink? Is there a place to kick up my feet? Like, just think about how you're utilizing that space. So here, because I didn't want to take up a lot of room, and I was also very cognizant when we moved in, Margot had just turned 2, or was close to turning 2. So I needed tables, side tables or drinks tables that were kind of low to the ground and very stable, that wouldn't tip over easily with a little toddler toddling around. So I just used these porcelain garden stools that you could easily put outside as well. And they work great. So now I'll show you the other spaces that we spend the most time in as a family. We have our breakfast room and our kitchen. So like any young family, we spend a ton of time in these spaces. If we're home, we're here at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The former owners worked with an architect, as I had mentioned, to open up the space and reconfigure it. Before, it was a little bit more enclosed. It was very choppy. They didn't have a breakfast room, and so they were able to redistribute the space to create a breakfast room. There are pantries on either side, and it's just really nice because I feel like I have the best of both worlds in this house. I have my formal areas for entertaining. I have the definition and distinction between rooms and wall space to display art, but then this back part of the house where we spend so much time in the day-to-day is really open. So I can be preparing dinner in the kitchen at the island while my husband's answering a few last emails on his laptop at the breakfast table, and our daughter is, working on magnetiles and playing in the family room. So we're all together and we can see each other and talk and then come together when dinner is ready. So it's just really nice and creates a nice flow for the way that we live. In the breakfast room, I utilized a pedestal table. This is from Serene and Lindley. So it's kind of a fun spin on a classic serene and tulip table, but the base is wrapped in raffia, which I think brings some nice texture. And then we have these great wicker chairs. I had the cushions upholstered in a fun fabric from Casablanca, and I had the fabric laminated because I knew we were going to be spending a ton of time here. I had a young child, and so I don't have to worry about spills or messes. I can just wipe the cushions down. So it's super easy maintenance. And then this pendant is the Orsay from my collection with visual comfort. So it kind of adds like a modern kind of graphic, unexpected touch, while everything else is a little bit more preppy. And these pieces here I picked up at the Paris flea market on one of my trips. They are lithographs by one of my favorite artists, Raoul Duffy. They're these beautiful landscapes, and they have a lot of movement to them and have really beautiful blue hues and yellow and green. So they just felt like they would be the perfect way to brighten and cheer up this breakfast room. If you want to follow me into the kitchen, I can tell you about this space. So as I mentioned, this was fully reconfigured by the previous owners, but they had quartzite countertops and a different backsplash, different lighting, different hardware, a different paint color, I believe, all different plumbing fixtures. So we took the footprint of the space, but made it our own through different aesthetic touches and new materials. The countertops are a beautiful honed Chaldea marble, which has some really pretty like green and gray veining. The backsplash is one of my favorite things. This is from Anne Sachs. It's New Ravenna is the maker, but it was purchased through Anne Sachs, and it mimics a caning detail, which I think is so interesting because you would see that typically on chairs or other types of furniture. It's another French reference, but it's executed in this very unexpected way, and I still feel like I have a crisp and clean kitchen that's classic and won't go out of style, but this is something that's so unique that I haven't ever seen in another house, so I love that. And then some other very classic things. I have a Shaw's farmhouse sink that it's just, as classic as it gets. They've been around since 1897. It's really functional, beautiful Perrin and Rowe. Plumbing fixtures, so beautiful faucet, and I have mixed metals here. So I do this a lot for clients. I think it's very easy and appropriate to mix metals. I'll often use polished nickel on plumbing fixtures because it has a beautiful warmth to it. It's a beautiful finish, but it's a lot easier to live with and more forgiving in terms of watermarks and patina and just the way that it ages over time, because a lot of these finishes, the most beautiful finishes I think are living finishes. But you'll notice on our cabinet hardware, we have unlacquered brass. And so that was a fun way to mix in a different element and add some warmth to the space. The Urban Electric pendants are also in a brass finish. So they complement one another, but add like a layer of dimension and interest because it isn't all the same in one note. The island is a different color. We often do these contrasting islands, and that could be in a beautiful wood stain, it could be in a color. And I feel like, again, it breaks up the cabinetry because when everything is the same, even though this isn't a huge kitchen, it can just feel a little bit overwhelming. My cabinet color is Benjamin Moore Halo, and I love this color because it has a little bit more depth and feels like a nice warm neutral, and it still kind of reads like a crisp white kitchen, but it's not a white kitchen. It's a little bit more elevated, has a little bit more warmth, and I feel like this is something that will age really well over time. I've had my interior design firm for 13 years now, and I also have a retail store called Paloma & Co. that I opened 6 years ago, and I've had a very unorthodox path into design. I don't know that I really knew what I wanted to do when I was college age or high school age going into college. I didn't have a very clear understanding or definition of what I wanted to do. I taught for a few years, and in the last year as a teacher, that summer, I started writing a blog in 2007 called La Dolce Vita. And I wrote that for, goodness, almost 15 years. I just wound it down, I guess, a few years ago. But for the longest time, I would post 5 days a week and sort of built a following that way. And I have to say, in 2007, blogging, influencing was not at all what we know it to be today. I really just started because I wanted a creative outlet. I'd always enjoyed creative writing and was bored in the summertime when my friends in other careers were working and I was home from teaching. So it gave me something to do. And around that time, we bought our first house. And so I started looking for design inspiration. And there were literally maybe like 4 or 5 design blogs that I could find at the time. And their styles were very different from what I gravitated to. And so very organically, I just started posting things that I was finding and researching in books and magazines and people that inspired me, designers that inspired me. And so my blog then really started to take shape and gain traction. So I did that for a very long time. In 2011, my husband works for a lighting manufacturer called Visual Comfort here in Houston. I had been tutoring his young son in Spanish at the time after I left my teaching job and was sort of freelancing and figuring out what I was going to do with my life. And one day he called me and said, you know, we've had this company for 25 years at this point, and we've never had a formal marketing department or a marketing director. And I've interviewed all these people and none of them know how to market themselves. Would you meet with me? And I said, well, you do know I'm a former teacher and have 0 marketing experience, but sure, we can meet and talk about it. So I went into his office and I was so nervous because I knew I was completely unqualified for this job, or so I felt. And I remember him tapping on his computer screen. I've told him this story and I don't know that he remembers it, but I remember it very, very vividly. It's imprinted on my mind. He tapped on his computer screen and said, you know what's happening in there. And he saw that, you know, this digital platform, like the digital world, was really the future of marketing. And so he took a chance on me and hired me, and I was there for several years. And then I started to get the itch again to go out on my own. And I realized, you know, I really sort of like doing my own thing. I learned so much at that job. But from there, I decided to hang my shingle and take a chance. And I sort of helped, you know, I dabbled in design, helped friends with paint colors and like, what should I do in this room? And would consult. But this person came along and they had a full job for me, a full decorating job of a big house. And she took a chance on me and I took a chance on myself and we did it. That was 13 years ago. And in that time, as I mentioned before, we started Paloma and Company, my retail store, in 2019. I've now written 2 books, the most recent of which is called The New Classic Home and came out in the fall of 23. And I also have some licensed product collections with Visual Comfort. We do lighting and we do decorative tape trims with Schumacher. So it's really expanded into this very multifaceted business that I love because it's never boring, it's never dull. And my favorite part is still working with clients, of course. We just installed a house this week and it's just so fun to see it all come together and to see how much the client appreciates it in the end. So we spend a lot of day-to-day informal family time in these spaces. But what's really nice about the location of the kitchen is it's also right next to the dining room where we do more of our extended family and formal entertaining. So I'll show you that space next. Welcome to my dining room. This is really one of my favorite and most special rooms in the house. It's something that brings me joy every time I walk into it. The walls are up, they're swathed in one of my favorite wallpapers. So this is a wallpaper that I've loved for as long as I can remember. It's by DeGournay, so it's all hand painted by artisans. This is called Portobello, and it's their original colorway on Electrum paper. So it's sort of this like soft, warm silver background, and it picks up the light throughout the day in a really nice way. It sort of glistens and, you know, it changes throughout the day as the light changes, which I think is really special. But all of this is painted by hand. And when you really start to zone in on some of the details, like the feathers on the birds, you see the level of detail, how fine these brushes must be, the hours that it must take to do something like this. So for me, it really feels like this room is kind of like a living art installation. And it just sort of beckons the outdoors in. So I love that every day of the year, regardless of the season, it feels like spring in here because we're surrounded by these beautiful blooms and birds. And This chinoiserie theme is something that's fairly prevalent in my work. I've done a lot of it. I love it. I gravitate to it. So that kind of sets this traditional tone for the room. I paired intentionally this wallpaper, which can feel very formal, with a very casual rug. So the rug on the ground is a sisal rug from Patterson Flynn Martin. It's the Kino pattern. So it has kind of a geometric thing going on. It's this beautiful warm sand color. And that really serves to keep the space from feeling too fussy and over the top. I didn't want it to feel terribly formal, even though we do entertain more formally here. But we're not like fancy people with a butler. We just, like to have a beautiful space for special occasions. The dining table was something that I designed. So it has this really pretty base, this sort of fluted base, pedestal base that I just think is super classic. And I'd had a round table at my old home, my former home. So this room kind of called for a rectangular table or an oval table. And it's been really nice because we can entertain more people. And actually, these chairs are one of my very favorite vintage finds or antique finds. These are from the 1930s. They're Andre Arbus, a French designer. They're made of acacia wood. And I found these on a trip to France. And the dealer who had them wasn't there. He wasn't in his stall. So a neighbor called him, told him in French that I was interested in the chairs, gave me a price. I thought about it. I was like, I don't know, that's probably more than I want to pay right now. And I didn't have a need for dining chairs. But then we left and I was still thinking about the chairs. So we got in contact with him again through our shipper and made a deal. And I got the chairs, and they're honestly one of the things that I love the most. And they were originally upholstered in like a sort of light gray micro suede. That's what the dealer had put on them. And I lived with them that way for several years in our old house. And then when we moved into this house, it just felt like the gray would be very dull against this wallpaper, and I was going for more color here. So I actually had them upholstered in a Jerry pear suede. This is real suede, and this kind of heather color, which I think is really pretty and feminine, but there's something about it that, I don't know, feels a little bit more sophisticated, maybe because it has kind of like a dusty quality. It's not like sweet lilac. And it just works so beautifully in this room because it complements and picks up on a lot of the colors that you see in the wallpaper. And speaking of which, I kind of wanted the elements in this room to complement the wallpaper and not detract from it. So for drapery, I opted for this beautiful Schumacher Incomparable moire. This is actually a linen cotton blend, and it has this beautiful moire sort of pattern in the weave. In spring green is the colorway, and it feels a little bit electric and unexpected to me. So again, it's that like unexpected element that you're not looking for in a room and that kind of surprises you, but then you wrap your head around it and it just works. So I think it kind of jolts this room with some energy and makes it feel sort of inspired and fresh and interesting rather than going like a more traditional fussy route, which a lot of these elements, if they were arranged differently or paired with different things, could go that direction. So for me, it's going back to that like core mission or like my real like style sense is to mix modern and traditional pieces and to bring together what would be seemingly disparate things in a way that feels really well thought out and kind of collected over time. So, your drapery kind of adds that bold element. This piece came out of a show house that I did. I did the Kips Bay Show House in Palm Beach in 2022. This is a beautiful photograph from the Big Blooms series by Paul Lang. And I had this in my show house room and just fell in love with it. Loved the jolt of pink, the beautiful tones of the yellow, the pollen in the center of the image. And it just felt like the right piece for this room and kind of plays upon, the subject of the wallpaper. But something about photography can feel modern and crisp and sort of lend that element to a space. This buffet is like a faux shagreen, and I just love the clean lines of it. It felt kind of mid-century. These these table lamps here, buffet lamps, are the Orsay from my collection. Again, like bringing in a modern element to a more traditional space. And then the chandelier and sconces are also pieces that I designed. This is the Brigitte. This was inspired in a combination of like Murano and Georgian style chandeliers. I loved those swooping arms, but I chose to design it in a way that felt a little bit more usable and modern. Mercury drops are from an artist I found on Cherish. They were doing a pop-up. Cherish was doing a pop-up at Bergdorf's, and I saw them there. And I love them. The colors sort of work perfectly with the colors in the wallpaper. And what I like about these is it wasn't like hanging another big piece of art and covering up the paper or having something that felt like a complete juxtaposition. It's almost like they are coming from within the paper and are like a three-dimensional element of it because the color palette is so similar. So I don't know, these are another thing that like people are always surprised by, and they're like, oh, that's so perfect there. They love it. We didn't talk about the fabric on these chairs. So another thing that I often do is pair two different types of chairs with a dining table. So we'll have a side chair and then a host and hostess chair. These are super comfortable. They're in the style of John Saladino. This fabric is also by Casablanca. It's this beautiful flame stitch. I love the movement and that it was just kind of a neutral to pair well with, you know, that sort of heather mauve color of the suede on the side chairs, because if these were a bold color, I feel like the room would get crazy. So that sort of quiets everything down. And then in this little corner, we had the opportunity to bring in a banquette, and we actually do use this when we're entertaining, like either at the end of a meal or before a meal. People will sit here and chat and have a drink. So it's just, you know, really pretty, sort of in the style of Maison Jansen. It's in this strié velvet and has a really pretty tape trim detail with some nail heads spaced every other. And this Samuel & Sons trim is kind of a similar color to the suede on the dining chair, so it ties everything together. But it's just a fun little space. Again, this is also a place where on typical days, like sometimes I'll sit here with Margot and we'll just look out the window and see, you know, people and dogs walking by and recap her day at school. So it's a nice little space. Why don't I show you the powder room next? Follow me. So surprisingly, the powder room is actually a lot of our friends' favorite room. They'll come and they'll be like, oh wow, like I think it's unexpected, again, because there's a cool wallpaper in here. And I was very conscious of not having too similar elements throughout the house. So because I have a chinoiserie wallpaper in my dining room, I wouldn't have done that a few steps away in the powder room. Everything again like ties together. It's part of the same story, but the scale here is different. The colorway is different. I used another Casablanca textile here. This is one of their wallpapers, and it mimics the look of like a basket weave, which I think is really interesting. And now I hadn't thought about this, but I'm connecting the caning on the tile in the kitchen and now the basket weave here. So I guess I'm into textures, decorative textures used in unexpected ways. So it's very neutral, and there's a lot of contrast here, part of which comes from the black lacquered door that sort of beckons you into the space. And then I have these really fun urban electric sconces in there, the Belmead sconce that I've put some Fermois shades on that are in this like magenta color that's really energizing and kind of shocking. And so against this very neutral background, I think they really pop. We also have a roll faucet in that room, and we actually repurposed one of the countertops from the kitchen. So the old countertops that we took out, I actually really liked the stone. It was a pretty quartzite, and I wanted to add a little bit more like color and not have this just be another white countertop in the powder room. So we took that and had a new countertop made for this room. And then we reworked the cabinet too. It just had like overlay cabinets, and they had a lot of moldings on them and felt very heavy in 1980s. So we worked with our carpenter to do just like flat slab cabinet doors, and that made it feel sort of like more contemporary. And we have these really cool like brass finger pulls that make it feel kind of unexpected and give a nice juxtaposition to the Chippendale mirror, which is in this like plaster white, and the traditional wallpaper. And then you'll also see another piece by Raoul Duffy that I picked up in Paris. This one is a beautiful, another still life, but it's anemones. So beautiful flowers in a beautiful vase, and just brings cheerful color into the room. So I've shown you all around downstairs. Let's take a peek upstairs and I'll show you the different bedrooms. So as we arrive upstairs, you'll see there's a great series of abstract pieces here by Catherine Booker Jones from Alabama. I love to collect art, as you well know by now. And we had this great big wall here, sort of an opportunity to create a moment and do something impactful as you arrive on the stair landing. So these are really cool. They're actually just these abstract geometrics that are painted in a variety of different colors on top of antique French documents that she found. So some of them are, dated back quite a few years. They're invoices, they're notes, they're all kinds of things. So it's really fun to sort of look at them in detail and see what they're all about. But they have a lot of texture and movement, and just think they're like a fun, unexpected touch up here. Next, I'll show you my daughter's room. So this space is probably my second favorite after the dining room, or maybe my most favorite. It's really special to me. She had a really beautiful nursery in our old house. It had chinoiserie wallpaper, so it was really, really pretty, but I struggled with what to do for her in this room, in our new home, because I wasn't sure. I still loved what we had done in the old house in her nursery. I didn't know if I should repeat it or maybe do something new. And I decided to do something new, but sort of up the ante a bit. So I worked with an artist out of Virginia, Riley Sheehy, and she's known for her beautiful illustrations and watercolors, and does these very whimsical sort of Bemelmans inspired illustrations that she's very known for. I reached out to her and said, hey, I would love to collaborate and do something for my daughter's room. So she painted a beautiful scene. It must have been like a 3x5 painting. And I have the original somewhere, but it was essentially the scene that you see on each of these walls. And then she and I worked together to scale that to fit the exact size of the walls in this room. And she had it printed as wallpaper, and then we had it installed. So it's just really special that I can tell my daughter that she's the only one in the world who has this exact wallpaper, and that's like just something so cool and unique. And we sort of peppered it with different things that were really special to her that she and I love. So you'll find Madeline, the character from the beloved books, in the mural. We have some of her favorite animals, giraffes and squirrels and elephants, that are all layered throughout, and some of her favorite colors and other things. So it felt like something that would spark her imagination. I wanted her to spend time in this room and really be inspired and to dream. And I think, this feels girly, but it can grow with her for an extended period of time. It isn't so specific to any period of her life. So this is certainly one of my very favorite things. And when she's a preteen and wants to paint it purple, I'll certainly be sad to see it go. But until then, we're enjoying it. And this was another one of those rooms with the shallow windows where we couldn't do drapery, which was a challenge for a small baby or, toddler at that point that was still napping. So we have these also London shades like what you saw downstairs in the living room. And they're in this beautiful Marie Chantal bloom print for Schumacher. It felt very girly and pretty and just, feminine. And behind that, we have blackout roller shades that are automated and on a remote that I can lower and raise when it's time for her to sleep. And so these stay perfectly fluffed at all times. We don't have to maneuver them at all because we have those shades behind them. We actually have that downstairs as well too, but those are grass shades. So it's just kind of a seamless way to live. It's really nice. And then we have this etagere from Serene and Lindley, and it's filled with toys and books down there, and We have a variety of books on the shelves and framed family photos. This little piano she got for her first birthday, and still at almost 4 years old, she uses it all the time. She plays it before she goes to bed to, prolong the process. And I think piano lessons may be in her future. And then we recently, not too long ago, converted from her crib to a toddler bed. So she's really enjoying being in a big girl bed. But yeah, we, don't spend too much time in here. We're mostly spending time as a family together downstairs, but it's really special to have bedtime with her every evening and, getting her ready in the morning. So I know she loves her room and always talks about how pretty it is. Some days she tells me she wants to do it all in rainbow, and she'll tell me that our house is ugly. So God help me when she's a teenager. One thing that was important when designing this room, or when I design any room for a child, for any client, is that it grows with them and that it doesn't necessarily speak to a particular age. I'm big on kids being kids. Like, I love dressing my daughter like a little girl. My husband bemoans how many shipments we get from Europe from like English and French and Spanish clothing and shoemakers, but I just love those traditional clothes. And someday she will want a graphic t-shirt, and I will eventually cave. The same goes for rooms. Like, I love for there to be an element of sophistication and also the flexibility to grow within a space for a child. So, you're not going to find me doing like printed bedding with a special like cartoon character on it, at least not yet. But for clients even, like, we'll find what is the kid's favorite color, and we'll work with that and create something that feels tailored and beautiful and sophisticated, still childlike, but that gives the client the flexibility that it can go from age 3 or 4 to age 10 or 12 potentially, and then they feel better about making that investment, because any room that you decorate is obviously an investment. And so with kids especially, you want to have that longevity, and materials are also super important to consider. Kids are going to be rough on their things, so just having fabrics and whatnot that are going to stand the test of time is really important. What's nice also is that the former owners, when they worked with that architect, they reconfigured the bedroom. So this bedroom and our guest bedroom once shared a Jack and Jill bathroom, but they were able to redo that, and now there are special like individual ensuite bathrooms in each one. All right, next we'll head over to my guest room. So welcome to our guest bedroom. This house is only 3 bedrooms, but we're a family of 3. And as I mentioned, we looked for a house for over a year, so we made it work. The nice thing about the bedrooms is that they're all quite large, so they feel really gracious and spacious, which is very nice. This room is utilized by family if they're visiting town, or friends. Not all that often, but it does get some use, which is nice. And I wanted to do something in here that felt really fresh and cozy and inviting. So the walls are upholstered in a ticking stripe and this soft spring green, which is really pretty. And then we have these nightstands, which are by Oomph Home. They're really side tables, but we use them as nightstands. We don't really need storage in here. The table lamps are also from my collection. It's a Sylvie, and it has this beautiful pleated silk shade with a very modern brass column. These plaster mirrors I also found in Paris, and we carry in the shop sometimes. And then this piece of art is by an artist named Kimberly Moore, sort of a collage, and I just love the composition of it. The scale and size also felt perfect for over a bed, so it was a perfect piece for here. And I love that it's like striking and kind of graphic, but also quiet because of the color palette, so it really sort of keeps the mood in here the way that I intended. The bedding is from Matouk, and this is an Ian Mankin fabric. It's like a lotus flower, and I just fell in love with it. I thought it was so pretty. So we did that on a lumbar pillow there. And then I'll show you, there's a sweet little window seat here. So there's like a built-in along this wall that was put in at some point, some beadboard, some storage. We sort of carried over the ticking stripe from the walls on this cushion, and then you see that beautiful lotus flower print on these pillows as well. And this is a little sweet spot to curl up and read a book and hang out, and it's also a nice spot to drop things if you're spending the night, spending the weekend in this room. It's additional storage space or surface space, if you will. There's a built-in desk, as I mentioned, and that's kind of nice to have because my husband will work from home from time to time. I rarely do, but he usually does, and when he does, it's at this desk. This is also one of the tape trims from my Schumacher collection. It's Parisian bamboo, and it's just a really classic motif that I think works so beautifully in this space. The bed in here is actually from Serene and Lily, and I had this in my guest room in our old house. And I guess we're starting to pick up on a theme here. Clearly, I love caning details. I love just the crispness of this. It's sort of a nod to Louis XVI style furniture, but done in a modern interpretation that's like cleaner lines. So I love the caning, the warmth that it adds to the space. I think the white frame with the caning is really crisp and nice against the backdrop of the ticking stripe wallpaper. And then this bench is not fancy. This was, I think, Ballard Designs. I also had this in our old guest room, and then I covered it in a new fabric. So I probably spent as much on recovering it and adding the new designer fabric as I originally did on the bench itself. But sometimes you have pieces and they just work. So we made it work. I'll show you the bathroom quickly. As I mentioned, they formerly had a Jack and Jill bathroom connecting the two guest rooms, or this guest room and my daughter's room. And so now this was all redone as ensuite bathrooms. So that's really nice to have the privacy. And when we bought the house, we changed everything other than the countertops. So the quartz countertops were here, and then we changed out plumbing fixtures, cabinet hardware, tile, lighting, all of the other elements. So it really feels fresh and personal to our taste. All right, well now I'll show you my bedroom. Follow me to the primary. So as I've mentioned a few times, each room in a house, I really do believe, can have its own distinct point of view, its own personality, its own color palette. The important thing is that there's a through thread, a commonality that like ties everything together throughout the home. That can be as simple as white paint, and that can be walls, trim, you know, there has to be something that ties it all together. So this room may feel like an outlier, but to me, it really sort of works with the rest of the story of the house. It's chocolate brown, and I love sleeping in this room. It just feels like I'm enveloped in this delicious chocolate cocoon. It's so cozy and so inviting to me, and was inspired by another one of my design heroes. Well, two actually, Billy Baldwin and David Hicks, who both used brown rooms a lot. It was David Hicks who used what he called Coca-Cola brown. So this is sort of a nod to those amazing gentlemen and how much they've inspired me over the years. You'll also notice that I used the same fabric on a lot of different elements in this room. So I think what's interesting and makes the room successful is that the palette is really crisp. There's a sense of discipline and editing in this room. You have the crisp walls with the contrasting casings or moldings in a soft white. The drapery and the half tester canopy on the bed are just an ivory linen with a chocolate tape trim, and that feels almost masculine and very edited. But then we brought in something that was sort of fun and unexpected, a really cool element, which is this Brunswick Effie Letouche fabric, which is one of my favorite fabrics of all time. It might be my favorite pattern. I feel like it's so versatile. It was introduced in the early 1960s, and over the years, Kravet and Brunswick Effie have introduced several new colorways, and now they make it an outdoor fabric and whatnot. But this particular tan colorway has been one of my favorites because I feel like it's super versatile. And I already had a little bench on the other side of the room, which you'll see in my house. And I was like, where am I going to put that? And I had the idea to do this Letouche room for a while, actually. I was like, if I do a show house again, maybe I'll do a Letouche room. But I ended up doing it for myself. And I had these two upholstered chairs made. They're the most comfortable chairs in the house. This chair is actually my very favorite place to sit. I love to sneak away once I get home. I love to change into my PJs or like workout clothes, comfies, right after I get home from work. And I'll come sit here and like scroll my phone for a few minutes, and then I'll go downstairs and make dinner and be mom and do all the things. But I love this fabric. So These chairs are super comfortable. They have a great pitch, a great depth. They're tufted both on the back, the sides, and the seat. I had the tufts, the button tufts, covered in a chocolate grosgrain just to give them kind of a graphic quality and add some contrast. This piece of art is also by Alexis Walter, the same artist who did the painting above the mantle in the living room. And I just love how these colors sort of pop off of the wall against the chocolate background. This soft pink adds a little bit of femininity to the space. And then this floor lamp is from my collection. It's the Olivier swing arm floor lamp. It has this really cool hexagonal detail in the tubing. So that's just kind of a thoughtful design element there and super versatile. It's a really cozy place to read. In the rare occasion that I actually sit and read at home, I usually do it on an airplane. These lamps are Christopher Spitzmiller, and they're in this sort of antique silver glaze, which I think is really pretty. And the scale is really fun because they're kind of overscaled and tall. It was a nice idea to then bring in this half tester bed and kind of draw the eye up in the room. I wanted a full canopy bed. I was entertaining the idea of like full canopy with 4 sides and all the drapery. And my husband really has to sleep with a ceiling fan. We live in Texas. It gets very hot. And I feel like if you sleep with a fan, you know, like you just have to have it. So he had to have it. And we settled on a compromise, which was doing a half tester. And the canopy is also lined in the Letouche fabric. So the exterior matches or mimics the drapery in the room. And then the interior has that fun little hint of pattern as well. The bedding is also from Matouk. It's this pretty embroidered scroll in a chocolate color. And we have this chocolate lumbar velvet pillow with my Grinnell tape on it from Schumacher. Pretty blanket from Matouk. And then this is an antique bench. It's nice and crusty and it's gilded, but a lot of the gilding is chipping off. And I kind of love that patina and that you see the age of it. You know, like I do think that there's something interesting and charming about having pieces that are patinaed and not totally perfect. And of course, this piece is also upholstered in that Letouche fabric, and you can really see the movement of the pattern quite nicely. And I've paired these guys I had since that first show house back in the day. It's a Venetian silk velvet in olivine from Schumacher. So those little rolls have been with me for probably 10 years. And then in this corner, we had an opportunity to have a vignette. We don't really, like I said, I don't work from home. My husband has that desk and that built-in area in the other bedroom. So a desk wasn't something that I wanted in our bedroom. So we just found this console. It's simple Parsons style grass cloth covered console and just a place to display some books and framed photos of our darling girl. And this is a really cool Italian vintage lamp from the 70s that I found when I was treasure hunting. It has a cool raffia shade, and I just feel like it just feels like geometric and sexy and like unexpected. And then this undulating mirror, I think, is another fun way of adding some movement to the space. I'm a very firm believer that a house is not a home if the people who live in it are not considered. So you can have a beautiful space, but you really have to design from a place of functionality. And I don't just mean, is something comfortable or does that chair work in that spot? But really assessing the needs of the people who live there and the way that they live. How do they entertain? How do they spend time together? What rooms do they spend time in? And what time of day are they using that room? All of those things really inform what the design should be. And for me personally, you know, having just recently moved into this house just a couple of years ago, I loved our former house and we were there for 5 or 6 years. There's some really special memories there. Our dog, who passed away before we moved into this house, you know, was really tied to that house, and we brought our daughter home there. But when you start to pack things up, you just sort of, it's funny. I feel like home, there's a house, the shell, but home is really the things you love and the people you love. And once you start to pack those away or strip those away, it just doesn't feel like home anymore, right? So it's really important to fill it with the things that have meaning to you and that are special to you and that tell your story.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.